Good evening. I call to order the regular meeting of the Lakewood City Council for September 12th, 2016, 7 p.m. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Hall.
Here.
Wickman. Here. Vincent.
Here.
Roybal.
Here.
Harrison.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Shakti.
Here.
Abel.
Here.
Coop.
Here.
Franks.
Here.
Gutwein.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Great. Well, I'd like to welcome those who came out tonight in attendance. Thank you for joining us, taking part in your local government, and for those who may be tuning in at home or catching up with us later on. If you do have a cell phone or a pager, I'd ask if you please put that bad boy on silent. And we're just going to wave to a young man who's here tonight, one of our scouts who's working on his badge, and I told him he didn't have to come down and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. But that's what we're going to do next. We're going to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stay standing for a moment of silent prayer. And as many know, yesterday's anniversary of September 11th, please keep all those in your thoughts and prayers as well. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. All right. Item 4.
Item 4, Proclamation, Colorado Cities and Towns Week.
And I'm going to have Council President Shakti read this fun one. There's nobody here to accept it other than all of you who are here today, so you'll be able to be the first to know of the free events that we're going to have to celebrate this great event.
Whereas Cities and Towns Week is a statewide initiative of the Colorado Municipal League to recognize the essential role that municipal governments play in our lives. And whereas city government is closest to the residents and the one with the most direct daily impact on residents' lives. And whereas municipal government is truly government for and by the people, and those people are our neighbors, friends, business owners, and community leaders. And whereas during the week of September 12 through 18, 2016, cities and towns are showcasing some of the key services they provide to residents, such as public safety, streets maintenance, and parks and recreational opportunities. And whereas Lakewood is participating in the week by hosting free activities on September 17th, and all Lakewood residents are encouraged to participate. And whereas Cities and Towns Week also provides an opportunity to convey to residents that their civic involvement truly shapes and influences their communities, and we urge Lakewood residents to participate in their city government as frequently as possible. Now, therefore, on behalf of the City Council and the people of the City of Lakewood, I, Adam Paul, Mayor of the City of Lakewood, Colorado, by virtue of the authority vested in me, do hereby recognize September 12th through 18th, 2016 as Colorado Cities and Towns Week.
Thank you. Yay. Normally we hand it off and have some talking, but you get to listen to me talk. So on Saturday, a list of events. It's a free day at all 4 of our recreation centers. There's a free Zumba class at the Bonfils Amphitheater from 9 to 10 a.m. And I think last time we had free Zumba, Council went out and did that, right?
I did.
Shakti did. Thank you.
She can do it for us again.
There we go. The Heritage Homesteaders event will be at the Heritage Center. There will be free hay rides from 11 to 2 and free guided tours of the museum from 2 to 3. And seniors can dance for free at the Clement Center that night. So tune into lakewood.org/City Week to find out. And also this week to celebrate this, we're going to have the 3rd graders from Denison come down and do a mock city council meeting, which those are always fun. Do we know what our subject is this year?
Putting an amusement park on Green Mountain.
All right, putting an amusement park. That might be contentious, so you can imagine. I look forward to hearing how that turns out. All right, will the clerk please read item 5 for the record?
Item 5, Proclamation, Suicide Prevention Awareness Month.
We have some guests here today that I'd like to invite down. Richard Evely is the executive director of the Second Wind Fund, and we have board member Ken Wigg and a couple of other guests. Come on, we can scrunch up here. And tonight I'm going to read this, and I'm going to read it in memory of a dear friend that we just celebrated his passing, who committed suicide. And I think probably to a point everybody in this room knows somebody who we've lost due to suicide. And another staff member, I found out today, it was an anniversary for her of a dear friend that took their life on today a few years ago. So I want everybody to be able to keep in mind folks that we've lost and the folks that were left to live with this as I read this. Proclamation recognizing September 26, 2016 as Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. Whereas suicide affects all ages, genders, cultures, and socioeconomic levels. And whereas Colorado has the 5th highest suicide rate in the nation, with 1,093 suicide deaths in 2015, which is the highest ever recorded in the state. And whereas suicide also is the second leading cause of death in Colorado for young people ages 10 to 19, with more young people dying by suicide than by motor vehicle accidents. And whereas suicide deaths for teens in Colorado increased by 43% in 2015, and whereas youth suicides in Jefferson County increased 71% in 2015. And whereas Second Wind Fund is a nonprofit started right here in Lakewood in a response to 4 suicides in 1 year at Green Mountain High School. And it is now a leading suicide prevention organization in Colorado. And whereas Second Wind Fund has provided more than 4,200 children and teens at risk for suicide who had no other access to services with professional therapy, including paying for their treatment. And whereas the 15th anniversary Second Wind Walk Run to raise funds to pay for therapy for suicidal youth will be on Saturday, October 8th, 2016 at Clement Park. Now, therefore, on behalf of the City Council and the people of the City of Lakewood, I, Adam Paul, Mayor of the City of Lakewood, Colorado, by virtue of the authority vested in me, do hereby recognize September 2016 as Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. Please.
Mayor Paul and council members, thank you so much for making this proclamation. As a person who has lived in Lakewood for 8 years, I'm extremely thankful and grateful to this city for the funding it has provided to local suicide prevention efforts, because together we are saving lives. We are addressing these statistics, and I cannot tell you how important the decisions you have made to fund suicide prevention is. As Executive Director of one of the leading suicide prevention organizations in Colorado, it is my honor and privilege to be here with JC, a founding board member and volunteer, Ken Wigg, a board member, Jenny Nikado, and Patty Clark, also board members. And I would like to invite Ken to come to the microphone to say a few more words. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. You heard in the proclamation a lot of numbers, and those are all pretty disturbing and scary numbers. And hi, Dave. I spoke to your group not too long ago. But the Second Wind Fund, which is now in our 15th year here, the story here is a story of hope, actually. Because since the 2001-2002 year, we have been able to provide counseling to over 4,300 kids in the Denver metro area. And in that time, we have not lost a kid receiving services through Second Wind Fund. And we are not able to follow every kid all the way through, but we are only aware of losing one kid to suicide later on in their adulthood. This is, again, a situation where we're losing more than one kid per week in Colorado to suicide. And it's not just a factor of affecting, obviously we're losing those kids, but we also lose, it affects 25 people for every person who's affected, including myself when I lost my 17-year-old daughter the same year that the Second Wind Fund started. And for another little statistic, for every kid who completes suicide, there's 8 to 12 kids who attempt suicide. As he said earlier, it touches so many lives in so many ways. But we are making a difference, and we are making a difference because people came together here in Lakewood and said, we need to do something. This actually started at a church, the Green Mountain Presbyterian Church, next door to the high school. And the two guys said, let's throw a run-walk event, let's raise some money, let's see what we can do. Brought the funds over to the school, said, what can we do? And they said, not only were we dealing with 4 kids who we've lost this year, we've had 40 kids who come in with under severe stress and risk of taking their own lives. But for many, they don't have access to services because of barriers, financial barriers, social barriers, even time restraints. We provide counseling to kids who, with their, we get the referrals from your schools, your counselors are great, but when they have no place to go with their kid because they don't have access, all they got to do is call us, and that's where these results come. So again, so thank you for your support through the years, and also, of course, to the citizens of Lakewood who have continued to support us, and we hope to also see you and support us on October 8th this year is our 15th annual walk run. It's at Clement Park, and for the very first time, it's on a Saturday. So hope to see all you there. If you're not running or walking, if you like eating, listening to music, or shopping, we've got it all. So thank you.
All right. Moving on, and our folks just walked out of the room, but I thought what Mr. Kim said was the message of hope. And that's what we can do today and do as we continue to support the Second Wind Fund and their mission going forward. Those numbers were staggering, 71% increase in Jefferson County. All right, moving along. Item 6 is public comment. Public comment roster is available immediately inside the council chambers. Anyone who would like to address the council on any matter other than what is on the agenda will be given the opportunity after signing the roster. If you want to speak about something that is on the agenda, we'll get to that a little bit later on. So if it's on the agenda, or if it's not on the agenda, feel free. Speakers should limit their comments to 3 minutes. We have a little light system here that'll glow green. When you have 30 seconds left, it will go yellow, and when your 3 minutes is up, it'll go red, and I'll gently try to keep you moving on there. So, and I think with this group, everybody probably knows that we want to respect the decorum of chambers and council and direct your comments to council, but you all knew that. So, first up, Mr. McMenemy, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Paul, members of the council. I'm Dan McMenemy. I'm the superintendent of Jefferson County Schools. I'm here on my personal time tonight to share information about the upcoming mill bond election and ask for your collective support. Our community expects and deserves to have excellent schools. Our kids deserve to have outstanding teachers and support staff, great facilities, and the resources necessary to learn and grow every day. But we're having a hard time meeting those needs. To understand our need, let's start out with a little background. First off, state funding is abysmal. Colorado is 40th in the nation, roughly $2,200 less per student than the national average. If we were funded at the national average, we would have another $190 million per year to spend on our schools and students. For the past 2 years, I've worked with 177 other superintendents across the state to lobby our legislature for adequate funding, with virtually no success. This fall, you are seeing the results of this lack of progress across Colorado as a record number of school districts, it's 50 and counting right now, are going out for their communities for bonds and mills. Current state funding simply is not adequate to deliver on the promise of a high-quality public education. Let's talk about our competitiveness with the Front Range school districts. Of 13 districts around us, we're second in size, second in the number of schools, 9th out of 13 in per pupil revenue from the state. We're $500 less than Denver. That's about $43 million a year. We're 6th out of 13 in mill levy override dollars per student, about $800 less per student than Boulder. That's an additional $64 million per year. And we're 13th out of 13 in bond dollars per student. If we had the same bond dollars per student as Denver, we would have $977 million more to spend on our schools. If we had the same as Boulder, we'd have $1.15 billion more to spend on our schools. As you can imagine, this can create a tremendous disparity and lack of competitiveness in our ability to attract and retain staff, to provide resources and opportunities for our students, and have the facilities necessary to provide a safe, high-quality experience. We have 155 schools. The average building in Jeffco is 45 years old. We have 239 portables used for student classrooms. Only 5 of those were built after 1988. Virtually all of our schools have long overdue needs in terms of repairs and improvements. The $535 million bond is about providing safe and high-quality learning environments for our students and staff, extending the life of existing schools, and better utilization of our current district facilities. In Lakewood alone, $146.2 million will be spent on our facilities. The $33 million mill will provide us with additional operational dollars in specific targeted areas identified through the budgeting process last spring as unmet needs. We've exhausted virtually every other avenue to continue to provide the quality of education we all expect our students to have. We need to work together for a common good, for our students, for our future. In closing, I'm here tonight asking you to pass a resolution as a council supporting Jeffco 3A, 3B. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for coming out, and thanks for all you do for our kids. Next up, I have Mr. Ron Mitchell. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening, and thank you, Mayor Paul, members of the Lakewood City Council. My name is Ron Mitchell. I am a Lakewood resident, by the way, but I'm really here to address you tonight as the president of the Jeffco School Board. So I own up to what I'm about this evening. Recently, our Board of Education approved a bond mill levy initiative to be placed on the ballot this November. I'd like to share with you my thoughts about why our Board of Education unanimously took that action. First, the need is urgent, and the financial conditions that exist today are excellent. The governmental bond rates, the borrowing rates are as low as they've ever been, and I believe as low as they're ever going to go. The state has a funding crisis. Dan mentioned that, we're short $80 million a year. That happened. We have to learn to live with it and chart a brighter future for our students. We have not made major investments in our buildings since 2004. And we believe as a board that we have a responsibility to protect the prior investments of citizens in our buildings over the last decades, actually. One component of great communities is great schools, not the only component. I get that. You guys think about a lot of things, roads and police and parks and recreational facilities. I understand your role. Mine is education. I believe schools play an important role in our communities. The impact of this bond mill on all of our residents. Tonight I'm speaking to you, so I'm going to say your residents is significant. New and improved buildings and improved learning environments for our students, increased compensation for teachers, improved safety and security for students, a high priority for us, increased mental health services. I was thinking about that when I listened to the last presentation. Increased funding to each of our schools, expanded career pathways for students. That's one of the goals in our 2020 vision. And we want to ensure that our students are career and workforce ready. I'd like you to know that we have a couple of major endorsements. We're working on others, but we do have the West Chamber of Commerce that has endorsed this package. And interesting, and I'm pleased with this one, the Jeffco Charter Schools Consortium actually has endorsed this. I am here tonight to ask that this council consider a resolution in support of our 3A and 3B measures. I know that I'm asking you to support a tax increase. I get that. I do not, however, believe that this should be a partisan issue. And I'm going to try to convince you that I really do believe that. It's not just convenient to say, but rather, what I believe is that it is our collective responsibility, regardless of our political beliefs, it is our responsibility as citizens to ensure that our young people receive a quality education and are prepared to be successful and face the challenges that lie ahead of them in the future. We, collectively, are responsible for preparing tomorrow's leaders. And then I would like to say,
Sorry, sir.
Adam is telling me it's time to wrap it. I want to say thank you for your time. I'd like to leave a draft resolution with.
We can leave that
if
with
I
the
may.
clerk.
I have no illusion that this is exactly what you need to do, but if it makes it easier for you to consider it, that's fine. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out. Next up on the public comment roster, we have Chief Dan McCaskey. And it looks like Jesse Burns, are you going to be joining? All right. 2 with 1 stone. Means we don't give you 6 minutes, so.
I'm sorry about that. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Dan McCaskey, the Interim Chief of Police for the Lakewood Police Department, and this is Jesse Burns, the Director of Marketing and Communication for the Foothills Animal Shelter. And as many of you know, per the intergovernmental agreement, the City of Lakewood holds a board position on the Board of Directors for the animal shelter, and I've been doing that. I've had the honor of serving on that board for the last 4 years, one of the many hats that I wear with the police department. And we have a special event coming up, and Jesse's here to talk about that. And the City of Lakewood is one of the biggest users of the animal shelter, and so this is really a special event. So I'll turn it over to Jesse.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm Jesse Burns. I'm from Foothills Animal Shelter, and I'm here to talk about an event that we have coming up this Saturday, September 17th, called Toby's Pet Parade and Fair. It's going to be held from 9 a.m. to noon at the Jefferson County Fairgrounds, and it's really an event to benefit the animal shelter. We're hoping it's going to be a really fun, family-friendly event. The day is going to kick off with a parade where people can dress up their dogs in costumes. They can either create their own costumes, buy a costume, even put on a festive bandana, anything that they want. They'll walk in the parade. They're also going to be judged for creativity. There's a pet owner lookalike category, so they're going to be judged and can compete for prizes in that. After the parade, there's going to be a really fun, family-friendly fair where there's going to be games. We're going to have ring toss games where people can get prizes. We're also going to have demonstrations, so dog flyball demonstrations, dog agility demonstrations. People will actually even get to go out and try the dog agility course with their own dog if they want, which will be really fun. So we're really just hoping it's going to be a really great event. And we're just encouraging a lot of people to come out and support us. Like I said, all funds raised are going to benefit the homeless pets at Foothills Animal Shelter. We see over 9,500 animals every year come through our doors, and we have to provide medical care, behavioral care, and just day-to-day food and water care to these animals. And so all the money raised will go to help those homeless pets. It's $20 to register your dog in the parade. If you don't want to walk in the parade, if that's not your thing, you can always come out to the event and watch the parade and attend the fair for free. So we're just hoping to get a lot of people to come out and support us.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Thanks for letting us know.
Yes, thank you very much.
And Mayor and Council, if I could just add, Toby was an abused pet and came to the animal shelter. When he was found, his mouth had been duct taped shut. And so the animal shelter treated him and brought him back to health. And now Toby spends a lot of his time in our police department, sort of a therapy dog. And we even gave him an honorary badge and took photos of him. So he's a great animal, great success story. So, but the animal shelter again is one of those services that really make for a great community. And I know I'm a little biased, but we have by far the best animal shelter in the state of Colorado. So I would invite all of you and all of our citizens to come out and support this great organization. So thank you.
Thank you both for coming out. And again, looks like for more information, you go to foothillsanimalshelter.org/Tobies-parade. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Brockmeyer? Good evening. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Cody Brockmer. I'm here to speak on behalf of the support of the council to support the resolution presented by Ron Mitchell about 3A and 3B. I'm a Lakewood resident, parent of a Stober Elementary student. As he said, I believe this is a bipartisan issue. As I am somewhat conservative leaning, I decided to dig into the numbers to see exactly why the school board is asking for this money. While I'm not going to read out all those numbers that were presented, know that I've looked at them and know that it makes sense to me. As a conservative and as a parent, we need to do what's necessary. The buildings in Jefferson County are over 40 years old on average. Jeffco School Board finances about $51 million, about $51 million for maintenance and operation. If you take the 12 million square foot alone, not including the 3,100 acres on 169 campuses, if you look at that number, that's only $4.25 per square foot in maintenance. That's if you just use it for maintenance. They also have to operate, they have to maintain the facilities, they have to maintain the acreage, and keep the schools running. So if you've asked me, and if you actually look at the average cost to maintain that type of property or that facilities, I think they do an excellent job. With that said, our schools are getting old. We need the funds in order to help our schools, help them get up to speed. We're not asking for the greatest and the best. We're just asking for a good opportunity for our kids to learn in a great environment. As you can tell by my age, I'm around 38 years old, and people are moving into in the Lakewood community, into Jefferson County because of the school structure. That's small community-based schools. If we don't pass this resolution, there's a chance we could lose those small community-based schools. What does that mean to the community, not just the parents? That means that we lose open space that a lot of the public rely on. That includes, facilities that are used for voting, that are used for meeting space for the communities. So it's not just about educating our children. It's what the public actually uses those facilities for. That's, again, why I'm also in support of keeping these. In my particular instance, in Stober, if we lose that property, which, by the way, was donated by the Stober family, if we lose that facility and that property, there is not a park and open space in our neighborhood for our kids to play without crossing a major intersection. So there's a lot of things that go into it other than education whenever we're asking for this money. And when we go and we ask you guys ask the constituents in your area who may not have kids in public schools. When you ask them for this money, it's going to affect them as well through either property values, open space, meeting space, and things that affect them as well. We're here because we want good education areas for our kids and have competitive salaries for our teachers, but we also want to make sure that the entire community still has what they've relied on for years, and that's access to those facilities. Again, I thank you for your time, and I ask for your support.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming out tonight. Next up, Ms. Schooley. Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Stephanie Schooley, and I am a Lakewood resident in Ward 1, and I'm also a parent of two little troublemakers who go to Stober Elementary School in Applewood. I am also here to strongly encourage you all to support a resolution for 3A and 3B. You've heard a lot of information in the numbers about how critical funding levels are for Jefferson County and how much of those resources will remain in Lakewood supporting K-12 facilities, teachers, and support staff. As a Stober parent, when we heard that Stober was on the list of potential closures in the initial draft of the master facilities plan for the school district, we convened together not just parents, but members of the local homeowners associations, local business members, most of my neighbors who are retired and haven't had children in K-12 schools in a while, but who think about Stober as an anchor institution, as a lot of Lakewood schools are. The small community schools model is critically important, not just for us who find that to be of value for the way in which our kids are educated, but also for my neighbors who count on that close relationship and understanding of who's in their community that creates the inclusive community that I know that Lakewood really values and wants to see happen in the future. As we move forward, and I greatly appreciate the collegiality of Superintendent McMenemy and the Jefferson County School Board in listening to sometimes persistent testimony and requests and emails and phone calls from members of my neighborhood and across Jefferson County, but in Lakewood specifically, what Stober means for being able to educate our children, not just for their future college and career opportunities, but also for how they engage in communities as Lakewood residents. Our students have a really good understanding based on our example that we've set in showing up to school board meetings and going to city council meetings, that this is their school and that we need to make a strong case and fight for what is really important to us. Stober celebrated its 50th anniversary last year, and that is somewhat clear in the lack of investment around some of the rust in the water and the failing mechanical systems. It is a Herculean effort that the support staff, teachers, and administrators go through to provide a high-quality education to our students with that lack of investment. I know that's not your fault, and it's not necessarily my fault, but as a member of Lakewood, I am more than happy to, and I know that in talking to my neighbors, they are more than happy to put in the less than $210 a year for the median price of a home in Lakewood to make sure that we continue to teach children, not just for educational success, which requires an update in their facilities, and it requires us to maintain and retain really good teachers, but also that they are members of their community and that communities care about them and will invest in them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Burns, come on down. Good evening. Welcome.
Hello, Mike Burns. Lakewood. Been here a while. Getting to that, big no there. I mean, this tax proposal increase is just the cost of the payback alone, almost double, is absolutely absurd. It's a terrible proposal. So there's other ways like tightening the belt. Secondly, I don't know where it stands in Lakewood, but please, no retail weed. That will just bring crime to this city. I think you guys addressed it a month or two ago. We can't have that. That just brings crime. How much money, I'm wondering, goes to... I'm wondering about this basically unconstitutional fee for dog licenses in Jefferson County. Where does all that money go? According to, I believe it was Ms. Hodgson and others, every penny, not one of it, goes to the city of Lakewood. It goes to all benefit and financially keep Foothills Animal Shelter standing up. Why? Why? Under the guise that we'll be able to bring your dog safely home if he gets out. Really? Well, that's what dog tags are for. And if people are, if they can't go out and go to PetSmart and buy a dog tag that has the name and address and phone number on it, I don't see any benefit to this. It's unconstitutional. Taxation without representation. the city under the guise of penalty of law. I can get a ticket if my dog isn't licensed. So, Mayor Paul, you and I talked about the 6th Avenue eastbound exit ramp off of Union about 3 years ago, I believe. I saw another accident there. The lane that you know exactly, I don't know, I don't have time to, but it's not a continuous lane when you're getting onto Union, heading southbound on Union, and there's been too many accidents right there because I don't know why, but most people think that's a continuous lane. I know a cop car got hit there when he was investigating a traffic accident. So if we can do something about that, I mean, look into it. Mr. Mayor, I know you and I discussed it, and you thought it was rather stupid that it didn't have a continuous. In fact, you thought it had a continuous lane, if I recall our conversation, and it was not. So, how long, again, I talked with traffic engineering, how long is it going to take for them to do the lights, the signals? They said they were working on the north-south corridors, but I've gone from Pierce all the way to my home to Mississippi, Ohio, whichever way you turn, and I've hit every red light more than once in the last year. So I see my time's getting close, but God, I could go on and on. If somebody could ask the traffic department guy what's going on with the engineering there and the traffic lights, it's been a year or more. So thank you so very much. I appreciate your time, and you all have a great night.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming out tonight. Mr. Redmond, come on down. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hello again. I'm Scott Redmond. First off, I wanted to ask, Mary, you remember our last conversation about you were finding out if there was weekend traffic patrols in Lakewood. Did you ever find out?
So thank you. We have the right person here to answer that. We can circle right back to that.
Okay. And I spoke with David and Barb, or our emails. You know and this is my neighbor because I don't want it to seem like this is a Scott problem. And I will continue to bring a neighbor in here every 2 weeks. The noise on Morrison is a problem, a huge problem. I've talked to Officer McClaskey. There seems to be a disconnect on what I consider patrolling and setting up effective speed traps. There's drag racing. I have a 19-year-old who lets me know what the kids do. Turn your lights off on Morrison and drag race. Happens till midnight, 1. It's going to continue to be an ongoing problem, and it used to not be this way. There used to be set up speed traps or whatever's needed on Bear Creek around Morrison, but now, like I said, the presence of officers. We had a guy this weekend cussing in the middle of the intersection. I finally went outside because he was talking about killing people. So I called the officers. He was sitting in dark clothing in the middle of Morrison at about 11 o'clock. It took over 5 minutes for officers to get there. He got into a tussle with them. I listened to the officers beg for backup, which took almost another 10 minutes. That tells me there's not many officers in my neighborhood. But I brought this is my neighbor who can vouch for the drag racing, the noise. We had a Subaru a week ago going down, I thought it was an F-16, straight pipes. My wife was vacuuming and it scared her. So we do have a problem. All I want to do is there a way to meet so we can come up with a solution? Because right now I'm just coming down here and I'm about to feel like I'm going to get my name on one of these. Is there a way that we can meet Barb, Mayor, David, Officer McClaskey to come up with a solution? It's a state highway. It's on Jefferson County. It's a county issue and it's a city issue. We got to come up with signs, speed signs that flash, signs that say decibel. There's got to be some sort of enforcement other than just the Wild West, and it is the Wild West. Would you like to say anything? Or vouch for me? Or
You concur. I believe him.
Bob Maupin. I live along Morrison Road there. There is, I guess the best way for me to describe it is that if you have an important phone call, you've got to close your windows, be inside, because there's a pretty good chance that you're going to get interrupted by the traffic that's out there. And it's not consistent, however, it's enough that, like I say, if you had an important phone call, you want to make sure you're away from the windows.
Okay.
So is there any way we can set up something, or Barb, or?
Oh, we certainly can. Let's finish public comment. We can circle back to that.
All right. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And you were the last on, but is there anybody else in chambers who wishes to speak, who has not had an opportunity to speak? All right. With that, I will close public comment. We certainly can have a meeting, and we can have a meeting with our public works folks and our police department, and I'd be more than happy to attend that, as I'm sure both council members would be as well. So I'm hearing a little bit more about enforcement type issues, and do we have traffic team on the weekend? Is that Chief McCaskey?
Yeah, good evening again, Mayor and City Council. We have 2 traffic teams, and we deploy them during the week because we have rush hour traffic, and we deploy them where they're most needed, morning and evening rush hours. That's where we have our most accidents. Statistically, we need those teams during the week. That doesn't mean we don't have traffic enforcement on the weekends. We do. As a matter of fact, I was speaking to a sergeant today who said that one of his agents works on Morrison Road constantly. Unfortunately, as you all know, you may not see a police officer because he may be on other calls, and just because you don't see him doesn't mean he's not there. So we don't have our 2 traffic teams working enforcement on weekends because they're needed during rush hour during the week. But we do a lot of traffic enforcement, and our traffic teams are not the only 2 teams that write tickets. They're only a small portion of our enforcement efforts. We have a lot of agents that write traffic summonses. So we do have traffic enforcement.
And I guess this might be a decent topic that this council, on top of a meeting with you, sir, could discuss. I think folks have been dealing with it on 6th Avenue, and it's really metro-wide. You're starting to see excessive speeding, the motorcycle problems of folks on the motorcycles. That's what we hear about on 6th Avenue is the speeding motorcycles, doing wheelies, things like that. So it's not isolated to the Morrison Road. And having grown up in that area, I probably used to drag race on Morrison Road. So it's something that we've seen for some time too. But that doesn't make it right, or something that we can't take a look and try to do better. But be glad to have a meeting, and we'll coordinate with our city manager to make that happen. And Mr. Burns, we'd be more than happy to get you more information on the licensing and the structure of how that works. Each community pays into, through their dog licensing, pays back into the animal shelter to provide the services that they provide. But please. So we can get you more information. I have your email, and I can get you more information on that. And then as far as some of the traffic on Union, there is a line item in the proposed 2017 budget to do some work on a study for that whole transportation corridor. And then lastly, they have retimed the lights. We just had a report about the Union corridor, north-south, and I think Kipling was probably done last year. We can try to get that information to you as well that talks about it. There has been a significant time savings for some people. I know some people dispute this on Union going both ways, but it's been noticeable to me. So, all right. Moving right along. The consent agenda. Before I go into the consent agenda, I just want to make a quick comment. This council's been together for almost 10 months now, and everybody's been working hard to work together and really do a good job representing the people. And I really want to thank everybody up here for the hard work and what they do. And it hasn't always been easy, and sometimes we don't always see the same, but it's been a nice cultural change, and I thank everybody for that. One thing I wanted to point out and just mention to the group before we go in, because some of these items that we deal with can be quite complicated and there can be a lot of questions. I want to just always encourage council to reach out to staff prior. We're trying to get the packets together sooner, and that way staff has an opportunity. If you have questions or concerns, they can try to either address them prior or they're ready to answer those publicly as well. I know Councilor Wickman, I think you sent in a few today, and that was really helpful for staff to know where you're coming from and have an idea how to answer. So I want to continue to encourage this council to do that. So the use of the consent agenda has been made to expedite council action. It contains both resolutions and first reading ordinances. Resolutions are items of a routine nature. Members of the public will have an opportunity in a moment to comment on any of the proposed resolutions. First reading ordinances appear on the agenda only for the purpose of setting future public hearing dates. I don't think we have that tonight, so I'm going to skip that. Any council member may request an item on the consent agenda be removed for separate discussion and action under general business. Will the clerk please read the items on the consent agenda into the record?
The consent agenda consists of items 7 through 11 inclusive. Item 7, Resolution 2016-39, authorizing the City of Lakewood Deputy City Manager, Economic Development Director to execute a professional services contract for the city's 2016-2017 Lakewood Housing Study and authorizing expenditure from the Economic Development Fund in the amount of $85,000. Item 8, Resolution 2016-40, approving an assignment of the City of Lakewood's 2016 allocation for private activity bonds to Metro West Housing Solutions. Item 9, Resolution 2016-41, adopting the Jefferson County Multi-Hazard Mitigation Plan Comprehensive Update, April 2016. Item 10, approving the minutes of the regular City Council meetings of June 13th, July 11th, July 25th, August 8th, and August 22nd, 2016. And item 11, accepting minutes of the Advisory Commission for an Inclusive Communities Executive Committee meeting of March 2nd, 2016, and their full commission meetings of June 15th and July 20th, 2016.
Thank you, Councilor Wickman.
I'd like to pull items 7 and 8.
Right. We will move items 7 and 8 to general business. So, Council President Shakti, I'll ask for a motion to accept the consent agenda minus items 7 and 8. Is that acceptable, Mr. Cox?
Mayor Paul, I move for approval of council minutes, for acceptance of the minutes of boards and commissions, and for adoption of resolutions minus items 7 and 8, all of which are included in the consent agenda, items introduced into the record by the city clerk.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. I need to open public comment on item number 9, which is the remaining resolution, 16-41, adopting the Jefferson County Multi-Hazard Mitigation Plan. Is there anybody in chambers who wishes to speak on the item? Seeing none, I will close public comment. We do have Mr. Jesse Miller here if there's any questions. He's our emergency manager and maybe new to some of us, so welcome. Are there any questions? Shakti.
I just want to say that I think this kind of planning is critical, and we do it at all different levels, and it's good to see it happening at the county level, coordinated with the different cities.
Right. Any other comments? Councilor Wickman.
Yeah, I didn't pull it because it's not that big a deal, but I hang around scientists too much, and they talk about the electromagnetic pulse. I know I brought it up before. I didn't see the subject covered at all, and I really think we need to be thinking about that.
Okay. Any other comments? All right. There's a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. And the consent agenda carries 11 ayes, 0 nays. Moving on to item 12.
Item 12, Ordinance O 2016-12, declaring the intent of the City of Lakewood to acquire interests in property for public purposes for the construction of multi-use path along the west side of Sheridan Boulevard and authorizing negotiations with property owners, acceptance of conveyance instruments, and condemnation of real property interests, subject to further council approval.
All right. So I will now open the public hearing on ordinance 2016-12. Staff presentation.
Yes, Mayor, we have
All
a
right.
brief presentation
Okay.
by Adrian Stanchu.
Mr. Stanju, sorry. You almost got away. Welcome, good evening.
Good evening. Adrian Stanchu, Property and Purchasing Division Manager. Before you tonight is an acquisition ordinance, which is a typical part of a public improvement project of this nature. And this is a $3 million project. It completes a critical half-mile length of missing sidewalk on the west side of Sheridan Boulevard from 6th Avenue to 10th Avenue. It was approved as part of the 2016 CIP budget, and it includes an $800,000 TAP federal grant. The project will affect 14 properties, 10 property owners. In actuality, there are 2 additional properties impacted, 705 and 707 Sheridan Boulevard, which you may have noticed were not included in this ordinance. The reason is that 705 is owned by CDOT, 707 is owned by the City of Lakewood. Therefore, no acquisitions are required across the frontages of those properties. Same goes for the section from 703 Sheridan down south to the actual frontage of 6th Avenue. The area is within existing right-of-way, so no acquisitions are required. So just to clarify, the map that was part of the council packet was specific to this ordinance, which is limited in scope to the acquisitions necessary for this project. The sidewalk itself will be continuous from 6th Avenue all the way up to 10th Avenue. Across the 14 properties, we do need to acquire easements, hence the need for this ordinance, which initiates the negotiation process. The next step after tonight will be for us to establish values for the various property interests through an appraisal process. Then we will be meeting with property owners on a one-on-one basis, presenting our offers, explaining the process, and entering into negotiations. This is actually successful about 97% of the time. If, however, after lengthy negotiations, we should reach an impasse, we will need to come back before this council prior to initiating any kind of court action. This, again, is a very rare occurrence. Over the past 15 years, we've had less than 3% of our public works acquisitions needing to go through any type of a court actions, and most of those were relatively simple, immediate possessions or such. We will obviously be working in strict accordance with all applicable laws and policies, federal, state, and local. And in addition to that, we strive to treat property owners with the utmost respect. So with that, we ask for your approval of this ordinance. I'm certainly available to answer any additional questions, as is our city engineer, if you have questions about the project as a whole.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to now open the public comment period on this ordinance. If there's, see nobody, I will close public comment. And I'm going to go to Councilor Coop and Councilor Vincent, see if, I know Councilor Coop, you've been working on this for quite some time. So if either one of you want to...
I'm going to defer to Councilor Vincent since that's her hood.
It is my hood. And my hood's very excited that this is finally coming. It has been a project that's long overdue. I think finally the city said yes, that we need to connect those pieces. I just can't say enough good about it, and I know the neighborhood is very, very excited about it. Right. And it'll help economically, too.
Right. Councilor Harrison and Councilor Franks.
I just wanted to clarify one thing and to make sure that I understood the process correctly. What we're voting on tonight is just giving you, Adrian, the right to go and talk with people It isn't condemning any particular properties, correct? I want to make sure that I understand what I'm agreeing to. Thank you.
That is correct. Again, if we do reach an impasse with any of the property owners, and it's specifically in this ordinance, we have to come back to City Council for an additional resolution of approval. And the reason for that is we would only do that on a property-specific basis at that point if needed.
Thank you.
Councillor Franks, then Councillor Abel.
Well, first, Sharon, I wanted to thank you for kind of expressing the neighborhood's preference on this. I don't know, you probably still want to come back. I wanted to find out, has there been any preliminary outreach with the property owners? And if so, what does that preliminary outreach look like? I mean, is it reception? Is it some pushback? I mean, I just kind of want to get a general gauge of what the property owners themselves are saying.
There has been some contact with the property owners through our Public Works Department, both with our engineers and with the surveyors that have gone out and surveyed the properties. So far, the reception has been generally positive.
Is that every property owner or just a handful of them? I want to get a sense for if we've contacted 2 out of the X
all of
amount.
the properties.
All of them. Okay, thanks.
Adrian, you may want to stay. I think Councillor Abel probably has a question for you.
A couple. When were the property owners first notified about this?
I'll have to defer to Ms. Heineman that.
Good evening.
Good evening. Ann Hines, City Engineer, Public Works Department. Our project engineer has been contacting the property owners individually, and the contact started in July and August this year once we had a conceptual plan developed.
How long have we been looking at this? Is it in this year's budget?
Yes, it is in this year's budget.
Have we made any good faith efforts to bargain for these properties without the threat of eminent domain? And I know you did say that you will have to come back to us to actually get eminent domain approved if need be. But this resolution calls for you folks to be able to wield that carrot, maybe, of eminent domain in front of the folks you're bargaining with.
We have not had any negotiations with the property owners. We have not even proceeded to the appraisal stage yet. That would be the next step. We would be getting an appraiser on board. We will notify the property owners that the appraisers will be visiting their property. Once we do get the valuations established, take some work between city staff and the appraiser consultant. Once we do get that done and establish valuations, then we will sit down with the property owners one-on-one and make that initial offer. But we are months away from that right now.
Thank you.
Councillor Roybal.
Thank you. Quick clarification. The sidewalk from 7th Avenue going to 6th Avenue, there's a street that they can drive in through. It's a service road that they have on the north side of 6th Avenue. My question is, you said you were going to have a continuous sidewalk. There's like a drop-off right there on 6th and Sheridan. Are you going to put a retaining wall with the sidewalk going up?
South of where the service road comes in, there will be a retaining wall. The sidewalk will be up on the level of Wadsworth.
Okay. Are we going to do any work on the service road to improve that drainage system there? Just got to ask.
Yeah, I know. We are planning to tie into the existing drainage system along the area to the south of the service road, south and east of the service road, and then tie into the existing storm sewer that also ties into Lakewood Gulch.
There's right at the curve as you're turning in, and there is a big entertainment building there, but there's a small little piece of land right there that has been, for practical purposes, doesn't meet any services or doesn't meet any needs. It's too small. It's the curve. I'm not sure if that belongs to the state or if that belongs to the city. Is there going to be any improvements in that area to widen out that curve?
If I understand the parcel that you're talking about, it's the small parcel
Right next to the big building.
right, and that is a private parcel, not owned by the city or the state, and the project does not extend to that limit.
Okay. So that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Council President Shakti.
I just want to say I'm always excited to see sidewalks getting built. That it's one of the things that I think we all hear about most is that residents would like more sidewalks, particularly on these major streets where we really need them.
Make a motion.
And now I will make a motion. I move for adoption of ordinance O 2016-12.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Councilor Abel has a comment.
I would like to point out paragraph D. If we vote for this, we also authorize the city attorney to initiate condemnation proceedings subject to further council approval to acquire property interest in the event the city is unable to acquire those interests despite good faith efforts to do so. I would like to see, and I'd like to fashion an amendment to do so, that we go out and talk to these folks first and see if they'll take our offer without wielding the threat of eminent domain. Our former planning director, Frank Gray, once said in a public meeting that a guy asked him about what it was like to deal with someone under threat of eminent domain. And Mr. Gray, again, our former planning director, said it's like bargaining with someone who's going to be executed at dawn. And I think that's too big a hammer to carry on our first contact with these folks when we try to buy their property. So if there's interest on council, I would like to amend this to have us first go out and make that contact, and after appraisal, see what kind of deal we can come to without that threat.
So for clarification on that is the actual process. And Adrian, do you want to maybe walk us through the processes? My understanding is the conversations start, an appraisal happens, both parties have an appraisal, and if there's not an agreed upon portion of that appraisal, then it goes to a judge. And then the last thing that is left would be condemnation. And you said 93% of the time, 97% of the time we hammer out a deal.
97% of the time, we don't even have to come back here for the additional resolution to proceed with condemnation. Condemnation, the first step in that process after, assuming that we get the additional resolution approval, again, property specific, the first step is what's known as immediate possession, where we go through a relatively brief hearing. We get possession of the property rights so that we can continue the project. But the final step in the condemnation process is establishing an actual agreed upon value. That rarely happens because even if we go through the initial steps of the condemnation process, the immediate possession, we still continue to negotiate so that we don't have to go through a valuation hearing, because neither side wants that. It's time-consuming and it's very costly for both sides. The reason that the language is in here in paragraph D is because we are required to have an ordinance to approve any condemnation action. In this case, instead of leaving that as a carte blanche condemnation approval, we have specifically stated that we will come back for an additional resolution so that you can see any individual property at that time. And at that time, those property owners can come forth and present their case if they wish to do so.
Okay. Thank you for that summary. Councilor Gutwein?
Thank you. That was basically my question too. I had called to learn more about this process beforehand, and so it sounds like 100% of the time you start out with just first letting them know that we're looking at building a sidewalk, and that's already happened, and then from that point then you'd move into appraisals. Is that?
That is correct. Again, it's a lengthy process, lengthier than many would like. That's why it takes so long to actually get a shovel in the ground for some of these projects. It will be months from now by the time we get an appraisal done, get it all reviewed, internally agree upon those values and the procedures. By the time we actually make contact with the property owners, when we do, we make an offer, we make every attempt to do so in person, unless, of course, they're out of state. We give them ample time to respond. If there's any kind of contact from them, we give them every opportunity to have the two-way discussion. Sometimes it's a matter of the valuation. Sometimes it's a matter of making design changes, protecting landscaping, timing of the construction to work with their businesses. Basically, everything is on the table in those negotiations.
Thank you. And then I just also had a comment that I really appreciate all the time and effort that goes into working with our citizens to get the sidewalks that so many of them are asking for. So I appreciate it, and I'm very excited to see this project moving forward. Thank you.
Councilor Abel?
I agree. We need more sidewalks. We need better intermodal travel. We need better connections for bicycle commuting. I've been watching this process unfold for 20 years, and I'm very familiar with it. I am not talking, and if you'll go back and review what I said, I'm not talking about exercising eminent domain. I'm talking about negotiating with people under the threat of eminent domain. That hangs out there when we go out and talk to folks. And in the past, the city hasn't been shy about raising that prospect. That's what this does. We authorize the threat of eminent domain. And I would like to move for an amendment that would require us first to go out and negotiate without the authorization of eminent domain. In other words, I move that we strike D, Section D, from this resolution.
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to strike D. If you don't want to speak to this motion, please clear your speak button. I will not be supporting this. I think we heard from our staff that they don't start from the condemnation point, and I've had the opportunity for 9 years, and I think one condemnation that we had on Kipling and Colfax came down to the point where it was a tough negotiation. I think we got it figured out, but through most of the times I have great faith in our process, and it's a strict process that we adhere to, so I will not be supporting that. Councilor Vincent?
And somebody help me here. I thought we had to rather have language in about that legally somehow, so that it wasn't skipped or then having to come back later and say, oh, by the way.
Well, that's what the process contemplates, is that the authorization is given to use the full range of options available. I think the authority exists for the council to say we'll take a second action to do that if that's the will of the council. But the reason it's in there is because that's what the process contemplates, is that that full range of options, even though we have to come back to get further approval to use that tool.
Okay, so if that's removed, then does that impact here that you would not be allowed to come back and do that?
No, we'd have to come back in either case.
In either case. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Coop.
Mr. Cox, is there, what is the time frame when it says initiate condemnation proceedings? Is there a certain time frame to drawing up papers, filing things?
You know, I'm not sure what it means in the context that it's used because it's been used so infrequently. It would only mean that we would begin the paperwork, but no, I'm not aware of any particular time frame because staff still has to get the council's authorization to complete that process. So we wouldn't get very far, if anywhere, with the initiation of that process until we knew we had council's authorization.
Okay.
In fact, I'm not sure that we do anything until we had that next round of approval.
You wouldn't start anything unless there was some indication we may need to.
It might be identifying the necessary documents, finding previous versions of them, you know, sort of getting the preliminaries together, but I don't think we'd want to invest a lot of time in it, knowing that there's the ability for council to reject that option.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilor Franks.
All right, so I wanted to make a couple points. One, it gave me some comfort to know that it's rare, that it's exercise, so that does speak to some good negotiations. Two, one of my duties here is to make sure that we're being careful with our funds, and my concern about taking it out is that it does not demonstrate that this is something that the city is investing in correctly. If we're not sure if we're going to go to that next step, meaning if we're not sure we're going to put that sidewalk in, then it looks like we're going to be spending quite a bit of money to get to that point, only to then. So again, I'm concerned on that front, and so I do have enough comfort that we would do fair negotiations and we would treat our citizens and property owners fair. But the question I had then is, since it has been being contemplated and is in this budget book that I'm sitting on to raise me up because my chair won't raise, and it's this thick, so it raises me nicely, what are we contemplating for then for this outlay then? Is that in the budget, meaning have we estimated what we think those properties are worth, and that's in the budget book I'm sitting on?
Got the short chair?
I got the short chair. Not happy about it.
Property acquisition is included in the budget, in the estimated budget.
Do you know what that line item is, just because I'm using it to sit on?
I don't know what the separate amount is for property acquisition. It's an estimate, and it's not the final amount, obviously, because we have to go into negotiation. We have not done appraisals yet, so it is a square foot estimate for the permanent easements and the temporary construction easements that we need for the sidewalk.
So what happens if that estimate is in no way close to what the appraisals come in? What happens to our budget numbers?
I'm going to ask Jay Hutchison, the Director of Public Works, to come and address that.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jay Hutchison, Director of Public Works. On many types of projects, this one included, there has to be some kind of an estimate put into the budget on the front end. And that's before we've started design work. We have some kind of a concept in mind, but we haven't designed it. We certainly don't have any appraisal information, so we can't value property very closely. But we have a long track record of building projects like this and some knowledge of what the market's doing at the time. So we do what we consider a conceptual cost estimate. I could not give you a breakdown by dollars for concrete and dollars for curb and gutter and dollars for asphalt and dollars for land. Frankly, we don't do it that way at this stage because that's much too precise for the information that we have. So the number that's in the budget it's better than a best guess, but it's very conceptual. If, in the event that there's not enough funding in the budget as we move forward, then the only option really is to come back to the City Council and discuss the project. And at that point, the City Council would have the option of either not doing the project or funding it otherwise. I should also note that there is a provision in the budget on capital projects for some contingency. And that's contingency not associated with every individual project because we don't need it for every project, but there is contingency available. And once the project's authorized and it's moving forward and the acquisitions are authorized and we have the design done and have better information about the costs, still not a bid, so we don't know the final costs, but we may have the final costs on the land prices and the acquisitions. Then, if necessary, we can use some of those contingency funds in order to meet a gap if there is one. If the gap's the other way and the project costs less than $3 million, then the residual funds just stay in the capital improvement fund and they can be rebudgeted in a subsequent year for another capital project in your budgeting process. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jay. And I want to say we allocated about $2 million, but that might not have been directly to this project. It was for sidewalks, and I know that the Sheridan corridor was part of that when it was allocated. So we have a motion from Councilor Abel, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, to remove D from the proposed ordinance. And a yes vote would support that to remove it. A no vote would be no. Mr. Coop, do you have a comment?
I do. I appreciate what Councilor Abel is saying. I don't think that any of us up here, one of us, ever wants to go to that in place, but it's there anyway. Whether if D is in there or not, that is an option always. So even though I appreciate him bringing it up, I'm not going to support this.
Ms. Hodson or Mr. Cox, there was a comment.
Yes, it's always a guessing match as to what statutes you should be prepared to bring to these meetings. I don't have the statute with me, but I'm trying to verify what I believe Mr. Stancio has already indicated, but we didn't really make clear, and that is I believe that without the authorization in this enactment now, it would require an ordinance rather than a resolution to come back and get the approval to move forward with condemnation. So that would be the additional reading, the 60 days total. That's the difference, and perhaps Councilor Abel was aware of that, and we hadn't really discussed it. But that would be the difference. Is you have to come back to get approval, but with the approval to begin the proceedings, only a resolution would be further required. It would require an ordinance if we don't have that authorization in this enactment tonight.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Abel.
I don't think 60 days is too long to wait when we're talking about taking people's property. I just wanted to throw that in.
All right, so please cast your votes. And that fails. The 7 noes being Paul, Vincent, Harrison, Shakti, Coop, Franks, Gutwein. All right, back to the original motion, which is ordinance 2016-12. Any more questions or comments? I just would leave it. My last comment, I guess, would be what an important project this is for our community. If you've driven by there, Sheridan's a dangerous road as it is, and you have folks who try to maneuver on the little dirt paths that are on the west side. So I'm excited to see this go forth and appreciate all the staff time. Adrian, thank you for your presentation, and I trust that you will do a good job in representing the city and also balancing the community's concerns. Councilor Abel?
Although I don't agree with the method under which we're undertaking these negotiations, I do agree that we need a bike path, sidewalk, multimodal path in that area. And I'm conflicted, but I will support the negotiations. I doubt I would support any move for us to take property from folks for a bike path or walking path.
Councilor Vincent?
So when I go back to my neighborhood and this passes, I get to tell them that it'll be many more months before anything happens. Is that my understanding? Just want to make sure.
it will be many months, sometime in 2017, before there's any actual construction. It will probably be a matter of weeks before the affected property owners get notification about the appraisal, and then thereafter get contact for the appraisal, and some weeks, months after that, get contacted about starting the negotiations.
Okay, thank you. Because once they hear that this has gone through, they're gonna want it tomorrow. Okay.
If I could, excuse me, if I could add just a little bit of a supplement to that, what Adrian just described is the appraisal, acquisition, negotiation process. As you heard earlier this evening, we have already contacted all of the owners to initiate design discussions, and that process will continue and is active today. So the owners immediately adjacent will continue to be in contact or contacted by the city until construction's over, frankly.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Thank you. I too support this ordinance. It's the right thing to do. Sheridan certainly needs this. I supported Councilman Abel's amendment because I think it actually gives us a measure as council to understand how negotiations are going, and rather than wait until the very end when something has gone awry. Thank you.
All right. Please cast your votes. And that carries 11 ayes, 0 nays. Councilor Koop.
I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank council in seeing the benefit of this sidewalk that has been needed for entirely too long. And so on behalf of the neighborhood that has been asking for this sidewalk for a very, very long time, if anybody had driven by there, I'll tell you a little story. I rode my bike quite a bit around the city of Lakewood with my oldest daughter. She was afraid, and rightly so, to ride down this path that close to Sheridan. And people need this to get back and forth to work, to light rail, whatever, families, wheelchairs. So thank council. I want to thank staff for making this sidewalk finally happen. On behalf of the neighborhood group. So thank everyone.
Well said, sir. Thank you. All right, we'll now go to general business. Will the clerk please reread item 7, resolution 2016-39 into the record?
Resolution 2016-39, authorizing the City of Lakewood Deputy City Manager, Economic Development Director to execute a professional services contract for the city's 2016 to 2017 Lakewood Housing Study, and authorizing expenditure from the Economic Development Fund in the amount of $85,000.
Great. And we have a presentation tonight from Deputy City Manager Nanette Nealon, and she will be joined a little bit later by David Schwartz, VP of EPS.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tonight, I'm proud to bring to you a contract to achieve some of the City Council goals as articulated earlier this year. This endeavor is a housing study to answer several of the questions that have come up over the course of the past 6 months as we started engaging in it. And we'll go through some of those questions in our consultant's presentation. But in addition, there's been a little misnomer, and so I want to correct it, but it's something that we found that most other cities do. This is not a study about affordable housing only. Affordable housing is one component of the housing choices that we'll be exploring for the city of Lakewood. And when we do that, we're looking at 3 main elements of this study. The first is to identify what exists in the city of Lakewood today. And as much as that seems like a simple question, it is not. And there's several databases, and our consultant will engage in pulling that information together. That will give you that perspective, and we hope to have that complete in early October as an information data point. Once we get that, we'll start looking at and working with City Council for education of understanding the complex housing situation, different terms of art that are used interchangeably. An example is affordable housing and attainable housing. And so that all of Council has a common notation of terms so that when we start working with the further identification of a vision that the City Council can develop for housing, we all speak with the same acronyms. With that, we're also looking at another education session that will come out of after our first education session, and that will be determined by you. But we've anticipated one of those education sessions could look like, here's the cost of development, and why do developers develop where they do, what costs are in part of the project, and that's a choice that City Council can direct us as staff and the consultant to complete. We think then in January we'll be at a point in time where we can start talking about here are the gaps, and that's where you take the needs and then the vision. If the vision is we want to have housing for millennials in a certain area of the city, we will have that discussion. If it's for age in place, what does that look like? What does the housing stock need to be? And then from there, our hope is in March timeframe, City Council will be able to start identifying and through a facilitated process to develop a vision for the city of Lakewood. So with that, there were a couple questions, and did appreciate the questions that came forward. Some of them I won't answer because I think they'll be answered in our consultant's presentation on the scope of services and how they're going to engage. But there was a question of the use of the economic development funds for this process. And the economic development funds have a wide range of uses that can be utilized. And the Economic Development Fund supports the operations and the staff salaries for the Office of Economic Development. We're allowed to use those funds for promotion of tourism. We can provide financial assistance for business enterprises, the construction of physical public improvements, any projects for revitalization of physically deteriorating areas, efforts for the creation of new jobs through the relocation of new businesses or industries, and last, projects that advance economic goals of the city, which may include but not limited to any economic studies, engineering studies, studies for public and non-public improvements. So that's where our authority for the use of the funds are part of that. With that, I'd like to introduce David Schwartz. He'll go over his presentation. Then he and I will be available because I think there were other questions that were coming up. But let's see what gets answered and what doesn't get answered in the presentation. Thanks, David.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and council members, and thank you, Nanette, for inviting me to speak to you tonight. I have a short presentation that I'd like to give to you that hopefully will answer some of the questions that you might have about what this project will attempt to answer, and the direction that we hope to give to you as you develop a vision for moving forward. So I should. Our firm is Economic and Planning Systems. We are a full-service economics consulting firm. We have 4 offices in the U.S. Denver is the office where I'm based. We have 3 offices in California. As a lot of people know, California is a highly regulated state, and there's a lot of work. But we work with private and public sector clients throughout the United States out of the Denver office. My work has spanned from Portland, Oregon, to Chicago, to Nashville and Alexandria, Virginia, and everything in between. Listed are our areas of expertise. As I mentioned, we're a full-service economics consulting firm. Tonight I'm speaking to you on a few of our areas of specialization. My areas of specialization in particular, as I've been at EPS for 10 years, are housing policy and feasibility, economic impact and development studies, and industry analysis, and also forecasting, as well as development feasibility. So the specializations of the staff that will be supporting me on this effort include the full range of the areas of expertise that we have. A few types of the of work that we do in the area of housing policy and feasibility are listed on the left side of your screen here. I would like to highlight that our work is not just limited to public sector clients in terms of housing. It is not just limited to affordable housing or even just workforce housing. We work with developers, for-profit developers. We work with nonprofit developers. We work with development authorities. We work with regional authorities on market, residential, non-residential, mixed use, industrial developments. We work on fiscal and economic impact studies related to land use, related to a variety of different things that touch on housing. We also work on the full spectrum of more traditional planning documents, such as comprehensive plans. We work on consolidated plans, and everything in between is listed there. On the right side of your screen are a few of our recent clients. I have worked for all of those clients. This is representative of the last 3 years, except for the city of Aurora. We have conducted some type of housing work for each of these communities, not just in the metro area, but as well around the U.S. These studies have addressed a very wide range of topics that I'll get into when I touch on the scope of services that staff identified in the RFP we responded to. I was asked to list out a couple of our current clients. On the left side, we have some of the clients that we're currently working with in terms of housing. We continue to work with the City of Nashville, the City of Portland on on-call economic services, also housing-related. Reno, San Antonio, Chaffee County. CDOT is up there, yes, because we're working with them to understand how to identify disposition strategies for their properties. As you know, they employ a large number of people that service rural and mountain communities as well as urban, and they have housing needs as well, and we are helping them with a strategy and financing strategy for the disposition of those properties. We also continue to work with RTD as well as a number of other regional transportation districts, the mountain towns included, and resort communities like Telluride and non-resort communities like Norman, Oklahoma. But we're also doing a lot of different economic impact work currently with the North Texas Tollway Authority, the Truckee-Tahoe Airport District, to Pagosa Springs, the Association of Air Medical Services in D.C., and some other non-Denver metro area clients. In this graphic, I don't want you to get overwhelmed by the visual here. This is really merely to visualize something that we sort of perceived as we read through the RFP that staff wrote. We thought that staff did a really good job in identifying questions that should be addressed in a comprehensive housing study. And so on the left side of the screen are 7 questions. This was one of the more vague RFPs that I have seen, but one of the more broadly written and appropriately broadly written RFPs that I have seen, which allowed latitude in the responses, speaking from my own experience in writing lots of proposals. But a number of those questions here I thought were extremely important, not only number 1, which are what types of housing are available and what types of housing are needed by different types of housing, by different income levels. That means from the lowest to the highest income levels to meet the workforce needs and to meet current and future resident needs. But more importantly, to address some questions that are not often picked up in housing studies and in city policy documents. And that is number 4, how are transportation and housing aligning? Number 6, what are the impacts of multifamily development on parking standards and demand? These are issues that are intricately related to housing in general, and they inevitably come up in council discussions and political discussions on policy development and strategy implementation, but that often don't get included in the body of work. And so I commend your staff for having the foresight to include those. Now, the relationship between the visual here is that we've addressed all of these questions in some combination, if not in total, in a variety of recent projects that fall into 4 of our different areas of expertise. I won't bother you with going through that list, but the point is we have looked at these issues. They are not new to us, and they are appropriate issues to look at in this kind of a study. It is, after all, really a holistic approach to looking at housing needs. This is a study to look at all aspects of housing, not just affordable housing, not just workforce housing, but also market rate housing. This is an analysis to look at the alignment of housing supply and demand. It's an analysis to look at whether or not the city's housing infrastructure aligns with the transportation infrastructure, because the two are very important and interrelated. This is also to look at the relationship between land use policy and land use code and housing. This is also ultimately an economic development study, because I don't think that it's exactly it's not synonymous to say that economic development is housing, or that economic development and housing should go together, but economic development means incorporating an understanding of housing supply and demand. And so this really orients the questions and motivations for this study around these three points here. Can the city increase its competitive position in the metro area by using housing as one of multiple leverage points? Are there driving factors or trade-offs that current and future residents are and will be making in terms of deciding where to live if they might be working in Lakewood? And what does this mean for current and future employers as an economic development policy, as you think about retention, attraction of new businesses, and expansion of existing businesses? What does this mean for the city's policy and its use of all the tools it has available moving forward? So with that, I'd like to go into the next 5 or 6 slides to give you an overview of the scope of services that we have proposed based on the RFP from staff. The first point, the first task is really orientation. It's an initiation of the project. This is where we meet with staff to talk about clarifications of the process. We talk about the timeline for deliverables, scheduling, and a lot of practical matters. Task 2 is really where we get into a lot of the detail. The task 2 is actually, I apologize. Task 2, the old task 2 was where we got into a number of the details. Task 2 is to identify what sorts of educational sessions we would like to work with you on. After all, this is a process for you, for the city, to develop a housing vision, to develop a comprehensive housing vision, to move forward. So these educational sessions are proposed as opportunities to engage in conversation with you, opportunities to listen to you, and to hopefully answer your questions. The potential topics that we have proposed are Housing 101, which is just a silly nomenclature for looking at general terminology, so that when we're speaking about certain types of housing policies, certain types of efforts, certain types of funding, certain types of initiatives or planning concepts, that we're all on the same page. The second potential topic is the cost of development. This is something that I found to be very helpful with other city councils. It would not be the first time I have done this with city councils. It is a very interesting study to engage in on identifying the cost of development. We, as market analysts and feasibility experts, work with developers very frequently on understanding the cost of development and market and financial feasibility. This potential topic would allow you to would allow all of us to get into a little bit more of the weeds of identifying how land costs have changed over time, how labor costs have changed over time, how labor shortages play into that, how materials costs have changed over time, as well as to understand, and this reflects a bit back on the city itself, actually, is to look at how much taxes and fees may have changed over time, as well as looking at other types of soft costs. Additional topics there are listed, but those I think are really kind of a process that will evolve as discussions proceed. And the right side graphic there is just to show housing is not just a single faceted issue. Housing is a really complicated issue. There are a lot of different topics this covers, and there are a lot of different areas of purview that housing issues touch. There are national issues that affect housing supply side and demand side issues. There are state and regional factors that influence the housing market, and there are local factors that affect the housing market. So there are multiple components to task 3. The first part of this is the supply side analysis. The questions of the supply side analysis is intended to answer are in what condition is the inventory? Where is the inventory? We would be looking at this on a ward level, if not a very similar level. Are any of the areas being underserved by any type of housing, and what condition is that housing, and what type of production of housing is going on, both in all types of residential products, that is multifamily, single family attached, single family detached. This is a comprehensive look at a number of different pieces of data that come from a variety of different sources on the right side of the screen there. We'd be doing a sub-city level analysis, parcel data from Jefferson County, U.S. Census data by either block group or census tract, MLS data, the multiple listing service data to look at sales data, CoStar and Apartments.com data, which we have a nationwide subscription to, allows us to look at where all the apartments are and what rental trends are in the city, as well as looking at building permits and other types of information. The second part of the data analysis is to look at the demand side. The demand side is obviously the flip side to the first component, but in combination, these two pieces form a critical foundation for understanding where there may be gaps in the existing housing inventory. So this would be looking at a variety of data sources from household incomes to wage levels, to activity centers such as employment centers, wage levels. This is looking at commuting patterns, that is commuting to and from other areas in the Denver metro area, if not surprising locations elsewhere outside of the state of Colorado, as well as looking at growth projections, either our own growth projections of the metro area, which we've done, which I've personally done quite frequently, or looking at national secondary sources such as the BLS's trends. So this is to really look at some of the important questions ultimately, which are not only on the one side who is being underserved or served, but how well the current inventory is meeting those demands. There are a couple additional questions that can be answered through this, such as the last question on the left side, which is whether there is a value capture element to this. That is entirely possible. In some previous studies, we have looked at this, and there is a tremendous willingness to pay by residents, either current residents or potential residents and future home buyers, for the willingness to pay to be near amenities, to be in close proximity to either transit, to be in close proximity to schools, parks, open space, sidewalks, recreation, whatever it is. There are a lot of different aspects of this that can be looked at. So I think I've touched on how you formulate the housing needs and gaps, but the purpose of this is really to answer a number of questions here. What types and price points of housing various types of residents by income level are looking for, how that will change over time, what types of environments and proximities to services people are looking for, and really understanding how well the city's neighborhoods and activity centers are aligning with those current and future needs. I'll move through these next few slides rather quickly. I think I only have a few left, actually. But we are including a survey. This is not a household survey of the community residents. I understand that there already has been a community satisfaction survey completed or is underway at the moment. So we having completed a lot of surveys in concert with these types of studies, are very aware and sensitive to the fact that people get survey fatigue, and the mountain communities get a lot of survey fatigue, I can tell you that. But we don't want to fatigue your residents with additional surveys. So this is going to be a unique survey effort in that we are going to identify a selected number of neighborhoods around the metro area to understand that are chosen for demographic reasons and certain reasons to understand why those residents didn't choose Lakewood as their residence. So we are proposing a unique survey effort to identify what is important to people. This will be used in conjunction with the findings of the community survey that the city is conducting. I want to make that clear too. And this will help us understand how satisfied people are with the community, and also things that the city can be looking out for as you are developing a vision for moving forward to address those needs. So now we get into, there are two more pieces here before the final task in this. This is the alignment of transit and housing. There are really two components to this, and one of them is quite easy to address. That is the first question: how well is the transit system aligning with the current housing inventory? That analysis could probably take about a day of my time to do. But the second question would not take a day. To what extent does the city want development to occur around transit? That's a different question, because not only are you looking at this from a subjective point of view, but you're also looking at this from a planning perspective. You're looking at this from the perspective of where transit might be in the future, not just where it is now. And so this really requires some rigorous thinking around the idea. But this little diagram is from work we did with RTD for the East Line market readiness assessment. We looked at all the station areas. We looked at what types of market dynamics were present at these areas and what types of development potentials each of the areas had. I'm not saying this is the type of analysis we're going to replicate for the city in this project, but it is the type of awareness that we're bringing to the city on this effort. The second piece, and the other interesting question of the data analysis, is the multifamily housing and parking demand element of this. This issue has come up in countless cities around the country in the establishment of housing policies, in financing, in incentive structures, in a variety of different land use areas. Again, we were pleased to see this in the RFP because as the metro area is likely to continue to face growth and demand pressures, the city of Lakewood is also going to face growth and demand pressures, and is also going to face continued challenges of the suburban to urban type of evolution of land use. And where you have that type of a dynamic present is where you need to contemplate how, for example, parking demand relates to different types of potentially denser land uses. And so this is a really good question to have asked in this study, and very relevant for the city. And my last slide is really to bring it all together. The findings of this are going to describe many of the housing market realities, how well the housing stock aligns with current and projected market needs, what that future market is itself, what the impacts of the housing stock and availability are on economic development. Because after all, there are stories in many communities of, and I don't know whether it's occurred in Lakewood at all, but there are stories, anecdotal and documented stories of businesses deciding not to locate to a certain area because of a lack of decent housing supply. And that doesn't mean affordable housing, it doesn't mean workforce housing, it just means housing in general. And so this is really an orientation to the larger goal of making this really an economic development effort. And so ultimately, how does that translate in terms of land use implications? So that really means looking at a variety of different resources that the city has. City resources, points of leverage, partnerships, stewarding resources wisely, what those findings mean, how the city can retain and attract talent, and ultimately, how can you develop a vision for moving forward to ensure that as an economic development policy you are attracting and retaining the right type of talent and that you have the right type of housing to go along with it. So thank you. If I was a bit long-winded in my presentation, I can talk at great length about a lot of these subjects, but I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Sure. Thank you for your presentation. I'm sure there'll be some questions. I'm going to go ahead and open the public comment period on this ordinance or resolution. Nobody signed up to speak. Seeing none, I will close. And just to quick frame this before we go into questions about the study. And then that I want to thank you. This was really your suggestion when council was getting ready to have our retreat, and there's been a lot of discussion from council members about growth and change and density and parking. And this was, I think, a great idea, a great suggestion for us to really understand. And it's been a long time since the city has gone in and done an actual study. And so I think it's super meaningful to have this information. In fact, I wish we would have had this when we did the zoning update and had this kind of information to add in. But this will allow us, I think, if we go forward, to have a better idea when we revisit certain aspects of the zoning code. So I'm going to go with Councilor Franks.
Thanks, Mayor Paul. I kind of want to explore some of the options about the downside. I live in Ward 4, and recently it's been under a lot of pressure with proposed multifamily developments tucked into it's the hilly side of town, and wanted to understand how kind of what the goals and objectives are, and maybe that's more a little bit for Nanette, but try to understand where's the downside, because folks are going to see this as being kind of, we know what our stock is in certain areas, and we're not interested in higher density. So I guess I'm trying to understand, will this study also bring to us kind of where high density is not something that should be put in, or where the transportation structure does not support that? So we're getting both sides of that, because I can tell you that my Ward 4 constituents are very concerned about spending money where they think it is just spending money to address people who may come, and they're being left out of the equation.
Thank you for your question. I think the short answer is well, I'm not sure whether there was a yes or no question, but the short answer is this study will address where certain types of development are or are not appropriate. I add to that just very briefly that we're not advocates for any particular land use. We are economists, land use economists, and in that dismal science, we do not always bring good news. Now, good news in this case means that high-density development may not be appropriate for that area, and it likely isn't. But we are not bringing a predetermined answer to all of the districts and expecting that one size will fit all. We understand that one size does not fit all.
Do you also look, though, at the current infrastructure? Do you look at the zoning, the underlying zoning that's already there? Because, again, we had this zoning overlay redone, and that's also another shock point to people where now there's things that can be built next to them that couldn't before. And so I'm wondering how does this study look at that and recommend changes in certain areas to the zoning?
I think as we get the information developed, you're going to start creating that housing vision and really look at what the gaps are across the city. And you're going to start seeing the association of the light rail or transit stations. But that transportation infrastructure is going to be an important component of it. And when you get through all that, you're going to hopefully, through this process, will guide you on a housing vision. Then you'll look to see that alignment with the land use component, the zoning code of that, and it might beg some questions for council to consider. But we'd rather have you do it from an informed position than a reaction position.
Adam, that's all I have for now, but I might come back.
Great, thank you. Councilor Harrison.
I have 2 questions. Excellent presentation. I am curious, so this just fit my questions. I want to make sure that this study isn't necessarily suggesting that the city of Lakewood would go into the development business, correct? That's not what this is about?
Short answer, absolutely not.
Or long answer.
Or long answer, or any answer in between. Okay. And the other question that I would have is, I know the focus some of it will be just around transit, but I want to make sure, Ward 5 doesn't have light rail. We're on the south side. I want to make sure that in addition to this, we're looking at needs for seniors, because seniors are really valuable in the city of Lakewood. We want to make sure, one of the we keep hearing is, I want to stay in Lakewood, but there's not housing stock that I can stay in Lakewood. And they don't necessarily want to move into a high-rise, patio homes or whatever. And I realize we can't make a developer do that. But will your study be looking for that kind of stuff too? You'll be looking at the age demographics and et cetera, so we can age in place?
Short answer is yes. The long answer, which is maybe only about 10 times longer, is that in one of the slides to talk about the data analysis, I failed to mention that one of the cohorts is to look at age as well as product type, income level, and location. Age is a very important component in this, as we'll be using demographic and economic projections for the community. We will be looking at how certain age cohorts are increasing. That is, the presence of certain age cohorts are increasing, and how the housing stock is meeting the needs for that increasing cohort, specifically age.
And with that, with looking at age, you'll also be asking the questions of what millennials want in juxtaposition to what somebody celebrating their 65th birthday might be looking for.
Yes.
So, because I think there's going to be potentially some commonality as well as some big differences there.
I anticipate that there will be both commonalities and differences, having looked at that question for other communities.
Thank you.
And Councilor Harrison, those were specific questions in the request for proposals that we asked them to address, specifically looking at, from an economic sustainability, how do we get that diversification of our population, and what do they look for?
Well, I think what's really important about this study is you don't know what we can do in the future if we don't know what we have now. I think you've got to have a starting point to be able to make any kind of proposals or corrections or whatever word you want to put in that sentence. We have to have an idea what's out there now. So, thank you.
Councilor Vincent.
One comment and then a question. This was one thing that was very important when we had our retreat. There were a lot of questions around it. And I know there's many of us up here who've spent a lot of time trying to answer questions or addressing things which people think are out there. So I, for one, am very excited because now I'll be able to have a document and I'll be allowed to speak with fact to people about what's there and what's not there, which I think is very important in a lot of sections in our city. So thank you. I hope we're moving on with this. The question I had is, as you were going through the study and you were looking at your data sources, I happened to think just right off the top of my head of 6 places within a short distance, some of which were scraped, which let's say were a single family housing. There are now proposals to do perhaps something with it, but nobody's bought it. Yeah, bought it for that reason. How is it? How do you account for that? It was here, is proposed for something else, but that's not in effect, because that's happening quite a bit.
Let me see if I can address that concern. It is the short answer is yes. We will be looking at a number of the different pieces of information that will help us characterize some of these patterns. Scrapes and rebuilds, that is looking at demolition permits, for example. Plans and conceptual plans, proposed plans for the redevelopment of those sites, to the extent that there are documentable plans at the planning department. We can look at those and identify what's going on. We can look at that in a trend, to the extent that there is a trend, to understand whether the number of demolitions of, say, for example, single-family detached homes is increasing over time, depending on the quality of data available. But if those are concerns, we will look at them.
Okay. And then do you take into account people who are trying to put together different parcels? I mean, do you go into ownership roles or anything? Because that is happening. I'm buying something over here, hoping that this person may sell, which will be 3 single-family homes that put together can be townhomes or whatever. I don't know how you account for all of that.
Looking at assemblages, or where we have opportunities for assemblage in single-family or zone districts.
We didn't ask the consultant to go to that detailed of analysis for the assemblage, but what we'll get is the housing stock that will require certain land availability by the time we look at setbacks. And what I suspect we'll get into is some discussion of what is that densification look like at different locations. I anticipate that. I just don't know how it's going to evolve quite yet, so we have some flexibility to work with that. Does that help the answer?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I think you know the things that are happening around certain areas, so thank you.
Councilor Wickman.
Okay, I'm going to divide my questions and comments into 2 general areas. First one will be the process. People know that I'm into that. And then the second thing is, should the government be interfering into the marketplace with housing? This is going to be a second. Now, my question's on process. Who put this on the agenda tonight?
Nanette put it on the agenda. We completed our negotiations towards the end of August, and we brought the contract forward as soon as our negotiations were complete with the consultant.
Okay. I ask that question every time, is who's in charge of the agenda. Are you in charge of the agenda? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, the process of the agenda is once we get a contract, it's our duty as staff, particularly when it's over $50,000, to put it on the agenda to make a recommendation to move forward.
So you didn't really make the decision, but you brought it forth to attention.
Yes.
Second half of that question is, why was it moved up 2 weeks? We were supposed to be discussing this originally 2 weeks from now. We moved it up 2 weeks. I was wondering, why was that decision made, and who made that decision?
I'm not clear on that question because I didn't move it up. It's as soon as we got the work done for the contract, we put it on the agenda. So
All right. Now I start going into some of the questions about the actual process itself. By the way, I'm a retired economist, so I kind of relate to what you're doing. Obviously, I'm not going to go into a lot of weeds with you and stuff like that. But one of the basics I remember from my economics was that you don't want to be looking at issues and just saying they're good or bad. Instead, good economics is looking at alternatives and figuring out which is the best alternative. So with that in mind, the question I asked you earlier were what were the other alternatives that we looked at spending this money for? Now, you gave us a listing of all the things that we have authority to go into, and I appreciate going through that list again. But specifically, you have a number of options that you could have spent this $85,000 on. What were the other options?
I took the direction of coming out of the planning session knowing that we were going to need to fund it. We did not know at what level of dollars would need to be funded. The Economic Development Fund would need to be impacted. So for us, it's to bring forward to you, if the $85,000 was not used for this project, we have a bank account, a fund balance, and it would be in the fund balance because we will be taking money out of our bank account to pay for this project.
We don't know if we could have used the money better. All right. Along those lines is when we talked about a study at the retreat. I'm not sure if we necessarily. I guess are we interpreting when we say we want to study something that we put things out for consultant bids and we're going down to 17th Street trying to find consultants to study things for us? I mean, I was thinking we were studying it in the house, and now we're spending money.
Well, we don't have the staff resources and all the combination of the expertise to pull together, as you heard Dave talk about from EPS. They bring that broad breadth of understanding the housing element and its interactions with transportation, et cetera, like that, and the different databases that they have acquired. They have financially made commitment to certain databases that as a city we do not have. As far as when we started a study, listened appropriately through, I think, about 3 months of the different questions and what the council was trying to achieve. At the same time, we were looking across the Denver metro area and saying, what is going on for housing studies out there? And I have to be very honest, the housing studies that I was aware of that were ongoing or just being completed only hit one element, and it was the affordable housing element. And it was very clear to me from the retreat that that is not the desires of the city council and for future conversations that you've had. So the scope, we thought, got you the closest to for city council to make the best policy decisions for the future use of the city, and not just go, here's our current housing stock. So it's a staff recommendation, and we needed to do it in conjunction with the consultant community to see what's out there, what are the skill sets, what have people done, and we're bringing forward to you the best proposal that we would recommend to City Council for you to formulate your housing vision.
Okay, my final process question is, did we look at trying to share the cost with either Dr. Cog, the state, Metro West Housing, business community? Could we share the cost of this study?
There's simultaneously efforts going on. And I think there's an urgency that I've heard from City Council, and I'm not sure you want to wait for some of the broader regional discussions, but they can be woven in, and David is fully aware of those. As far as sharing costs, no, because we thought this was a Lakewood City Council driven process, and it's for Lakewood City Council to develop their housing vision.
All right. Now here's my conclusion on the process part of my concern. Is we just had a long discussion about my concern with this surprise. You know, you get something, you get a presentation, 5 minutes later you get a vote. And we talked about using our study sessions so that we can hear things. Remember, it's not just us. Our community is also involved in the process. So I'd like our community to be able to hear these presentations. I mean, it was a great study session tonight But philosophically, that should have been at a separate study session. The community should have had a chance to hear it, get back to us, give us their input, some advice, so when it comes time to voting 5 minutes from now, that we have better input. So with that in mind, I think what I'd like to do is make a motion that we put this to a study session. I guess that's a motion.
All right, fails for a lack of a second.
I'll second it, Mayor.
Failed for a lack of a second. Councilor Abel?
Number of things popped to mind. Councilor Harrison's question about it, or statement about a starting point is right on. So we get a starting point for future decisions. What's the lifespan of the study? I know we did a Rooney Valley marketing study not long ago, and I believe the estimate of its lifespan was 5 years. So when you give us this information, how long is it good for in terms of trends?
Well, that's a really good question, and I, being engaged in a lot of economic forecasting, I can tell you that our philosophy of economic forecasting is a pretty conservative one, to make the most solid assumptions possible. That said, economics is an art, not a science, and this requires judgment, requires interpretation. And it requires interpretation not only on our part, but on the city's part, on staff's part as well. The longevity of this study is as good as the information we're able to get during the study itself. So that means if it's good information and if it's credible information that helps the city understand what the home buyers 10 years from now are going to want, that is, if we're able to identify what millennials, young millennials who aren't going to buy for another 15 to 20 years are looking for in housing, then maybe some portion of the study will be valid and relevant for 15 to 20 years. There may be some other portion of the study, however, that might only be relevant for the next 5 years. But we can't guarantee that the study is going to be relevant for a set number of years.
Wasn't looking for guarantees or a date certain, but it seems to be quite the moving target. I believe the last I saw there were 80,000, and I know this is just not just confined to multifamily, but there were 81,000 apartment units in the works in the greater Denver metro area. Meanwhile, the experts at Zillow, Wells Fargo, and others are saying, well, the millennials are no longer looking for apartments. They're looking for a place to raise their new babies. So it's a moving target, and I understand the difficulty of predicting where that wave's going to crest. But
well, if I might add to my answer to your question, in just thinking about it now, so in the time that I've been with EPS, I have had repeat projects with some clients on housing work, on economic analysis, and I've had the privilege to look at issues and look at recommendations I made 7-8 years ago. I've also had the disappointment of seeing that recommendations that were made, not just in my own projects, but in other projects 7 to 8 to 10 years ago, have not been followed, and yet remain very relevant. So I can tell you that just having gone through this with a couple clients recently, reviewing work product of ours 10 years ago, had they worked on any one of those recommendations, which are still relevant today, they might not have needed our services again.
Hint taken. Nanette, there's little we can do to direct the result of this study. There are few steps we can take to ensure that private developers are going to want to build what we think this study says they should build, except for incentives. Is there something I'm missing here?
I think that is one of the strategies. That's going to be a big one if you want to be able to encourage certain housing types in certain parts of the city. But I also think you're going to look at the densification issue and understand it better, understand the impacts to the existing homeowners and housing community, as well as your future, and you'll be able to make some infrastructure decisions where you expend funds for certain infrastructure, whether it be sidewalks, improved roadways, bike paths, etc., because you're looking at the whole aspect of community in that. I think you're also going to create a vision for the city. So with that, you'll understand also our employer's side of it. If we want to reduce the use or dependency on auto and have workers and where they live closer together so they don't have to travel so far, we'll start understanding that relationship. So I think creating the bubble above everybody's head being more similar than it is right now is critical to have that housing vision. I'm not convinced that if I talk to any one of you, you have that commonality of understanding of that vision. So I think that's going to be a major component here. But to say, a developer, you cannot go here or you can go here, that's going to be a little bit more difficult if the market's pressuring that and you have it zoned already.
I'm just trying to clarify our strategic goal. So if I heard you right, there are a number of strategic goals within this concept?
I would say yes. Yeah.
Okay. And one other thing is, you mentioned, sir, that you'll be speaking with folks who decided not to move here. Is it also valuable to speak to those folks who have just recently decided to move here and why they chose Lakewood, other than our great parks and view of the mountains and the wonderful personalities on our city council?
The answer is yes, but because the city is already engaged in a community survey, we'll be utilizing a number of the findings from that study to understand what current residents' feelings and perceptions are.
I want to dovetail on that. We have a base contract that we put in place of $75,000. We asked for additional funds as we move through the process. So let's say the survey information generates some feedback, and we want to have discussion of focus groups across the city with our residents. We have had a placeholder of up to $10,000 to look at some additional processes, which will also affect the timeline. What we think is best is get some of this information, start understanding where we get feedback, and then as a council, as you become informed, there may be some other questions that come up, and you may direct us that you want us to go out into the community in a deeper dive.
Will there be some direction along that sort at the beginning of the study to gather, or maybe to use already existing information as to what people want to see in different areas of the city?
We could make that happen. That's why we have it as a draft contract. David and I had a discussion. Depending on what comes out of your feedback tonight, we may need to modify the scope of services. But what we presented you is a best approach from our professional that's here.
It seems to me some of that information might best be used in the front end of the study.
Okay, we'll talk about that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is that it, sir? Councilor Coop, then Councilor Franks.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, citizens that have watched a little bit of this tonight or known about it possibly happening, I bet they're worried that they're waiting for this report to come back, and then that they're going to see that, well, now this is our plan. This is what's going to happen around the city. Okay, tell us all that that isn't what this is about.
That's absolutely not what this is about. To coin Councilmember Wickman, this is about a process of bringing information forward, having discussion, understanding what the information that you have, and then it's about starting to create a vision. If part of that creating a vision has some more dialogue with the citizens, and council desires that, the process can take longer, it can go faster, it can involve more people, so no, that's not it.
Great, thank you. So this is not only the long-run vision for going forward, but this could be used for potential, if a developer comes in and talks about a certain area that they're looking to develop, they would be using this report as well?
Absolutely,
okay.
Yes.
And then when we are making our decision possibly on that, we would definitely be using these facts, this information.
Yes.
In this form. Okay, thank you. I've got just one statement. There's out of this presentation that you gave, which was very informative, and you do it very, very well. There was one short little line that just popped out at me that will make this whole process worth going through, and that is the question: who is being underserved? I'm not talking about just the affordable. I'm talking about middle income. I'm talking about executive townhomes, whatever, the whole gambit of it. These are our citizens that we have to provide for in our own way, future citizens, and possible citizens. So I appreciate this effort being put into this process to give us some answers on what does Lakewood need for our citizens that are here and possibly going to be here in the future. So thank you.
Councilor Franks and Councilor Gutwein.
Thanks, Mayor Paul. The first thing I wanted to comment on was I probably would have seconded the putting it. I was contemplating the reason why I wasn't quicker on the draw and didn't realize that the door was going to slam shut was I was contemplating whether I felt I needed a study session or whether I just needed time to get out with my constituents. And so that felt very abrupt, and I'm not ready to make a decision. And so that's why I was just contemplating my thoughts, but I'll take that going forward, that window closes very quickly. The second piece was, it was quite a shock to see the price tag. We never talked about price ranges, and so I'm getting quite a bit of constituent feedback about, is this the best use of the money? And so it doesn't give me an opportunity to go out, take a lot of information, and make the value proposition, because I do see value. It's not that I don't, but again, this hurry-up offense is, for me, I'm being educated. The document that we received was 800-plus pages, and so, again, to look through tonight, that's not realistic, especially for those of us who actually have a job. So I'm not feeling like I'm ready to make a decision, but I see tons of value in here. But if I don't get a chance to go out and talk to my constituents, help them see the value and help them see that this isn't prescriptive. It's information that will help us understand the needs and also address quality of life issues. You have a longevity here. People move and stay in Lakewood, and so I'm just trying to make sure that I'm representing those who are already here and who have children who've gone off to college and they want them to come back here, and people who want to retire and stay here. So this hurry up thing doesn't allow me to go back out and really to get a lot of good information and to develop that value proposition. And while I think that survey fatigue is real, the people of Lakewood are very passionate about their community. And so I think this is such an important one that I think that matters. So for me, that's where it just feels too quick, too soon, and too expensive.
Ms. Nealon.
It's always good to put something on the agenda because it generates conversation. From staff's perspective, and EPS is just waiting for us to give notice to proceed. I think the urgency is the fact that there's been a desire to understand the existing conditions. And so for us, it has been more different council members kind of going, what is there? What's going on? So for us to engage, that created that urgency. So there's nothing magical about tonight, except for you might want to do a date certain so our consultants can plan appropriately. And it was just when we got the contract done, we brought the contract forward for council consideration. So
if I may add to that, and my apologies, Councilor Franks, I normally do leave more time. I thought the second was going to come from this way, and nobody seconded it, so I closed it. This is a resolution, an item of a routine nature, and while it is an $85,000 price tag, we're also voted to represent the people and represent the future of our community. So this was something that was born out of a retreat in February, and there has been a lot of excitement in the community to have this done. And there's also been a push from folks on council saying, when is this going to be done? I thought we were going to have this done 3 months ago. So, it's a balance there, and sometimes you just got to move forward. You got to make the best decision. You can't poll everything. You got to say, hey, if I'm for this, I can explain to my constituents why this really matters and why this is important to the city and moving forward, especially taking into effect, I live in Ward 4 too, and a lot of these concerns that I hear are the same that you hear, and this study really helps us really start to unwind and say, did we miss the mark on this zoning? Should this not have been a high-density area, and how can we change that? And that's more of, I think, what folks in Ward 4 want to hear, in my opinion. Councilor Gutwein?
Thank you. Well, I was going to say something pretty similar, which is just that, back during our council retreat, we had a really interesting discussion talking about all the different elements to us and our constituents about housing, and as you can see, it's quite complicated. And I am just so impressed with what you've brought forward to us and the ways that we can use data to inform ourselves, to get educated, to really understand this issue and how it's going to affect the people who currently live here. And I just want to say, too, how much I love that it really does look at the people who are living here, making sure that we're not having a negative impact as much as possible on those, but also really understanding, well, what does your next step look like? If you're looking to downsize, can you stay in the city? Sorry. So I am just very impressed with this, what you've brought forward, and really excited to be able to make an informed decision on such a complex issue. And I think that we will be really serving the people of Lakewood by doing this. Couple of questions. One is another aspect of housing and density. I hate using that word, but density. That's important to me is looking at sustainability and the impact on resources and water, transportation dollars, greenhouse gases, how if we can build closer to light rail, how that impacts those things as opposed to sprawl. And I was wondering if we'll be getting some kind of information about that through this study, or if maybe Dr. Cog would be more appropriate with that. I'm not sure.
While we contemplated some of those discussions at a very high level, it depends on how detailed to Lakewood we want to go. Greenhouse gases, no, it's not in the housing study scope, but we have access to our sustainability people, and there might be some metrics or cohorts that go along with it. On a high level, I'm sure you've looked at some of those. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
we have looked at greenhouse gases as a part of sustainability and economic analysis before, most recently for the city of San Antonio. It's a pretty complicated process, and I can tell you that would have a much higher price tag to add in all those different issues. It's complex already, and the issues that you've just raised such as related to sustainability and walkability, are really baked into the questions that staff asked and posed in the RFP, such as the alignment of how well the transit system aligns with housing and inventory. Does that mean people are going to have to walk 5 miles to a station if they wanted to take the light rail to work somewhere in the rest of the metro area, or not? That is easily quantifiable in terms of whether or not they're driving their car or not for 20 minutes a day or longer, which is usually the case.
Great. I think that would more than meet the needs that I'm looking for. The other question I had is if this would look at the importance of schools and school district when, you were talking about why did certain demographics choose different cities, and then also why did people who moved here choose this city, and just the importance of schools and housing.
Well, we do hope to, the importance of schools and proximity to schools is obviously very important to couples with children, and with young children specifically, and sometimes important to couples or other households without children. But we do hope that some of the information in the current community survey will help us answer that. We have done these types of surveys in other communities, and we have seen similarities of the types of responses. For example, we did a study very much like this one with these very same issues for Oklahoma City a couple of years ago through their comprehensive planning process. And the results were very similar to studies that we did in subsequent years for a variety of different clients. So I can tell you that we would anticipate some types of similarities and responses of the importance of these elements, but to the extent that we'll be able to answer that question for current community residents or prospective community residents, we'll rely on the survey information that we get as well as the current community survey.
Thank you.
I just want to highlight, because David hasn't had a chance to look at our citizen survey, we did not focus on schools in our citizen survey. So we may be able, when we craft some questions, understand some of that element of it. It's a very critical component for economic development. When we're trying to attract primary employers to come into the city, one of the first questions they're asking is about our school district and the quality of our education. So we can look at beefing up a question in the survey.
So I have Council President Shakti, and then Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, Councilor Wickman, and then Councilor Abel.
I had a couple thoughts when people were asking questions. Councilor Abel was asking about the strategic goal, and I think there's a lot more that might come out of it than what I might think of, but some things I think of are transportation. At Dr. Cog, a lot of the discussions are about the interplay between housing and transportation, and the interplay between where housing is and what transportation costs are. Where we built and what we built is relevant. The understanding the costs of development, there might be more to it than we might think. So, for example, I was at an affordable housing conference, and they were talking about the water tap fees and how big a deal that is, which just told me that I don't know what is a big deal in terms of development costs and which of those things might come from government entities, and which of those things might come from us. So to what extent is there regulations that there shouldn't be that are somehow getting in the way? Then also where to build, which is something that people have talked about, but if we're seeing building in certain areas and we're seeing stress in those areas, a deeper understanding of what makes sense in terms of where to build. And then in terms of the conversation about cost, I think it's important that we recognize that when staff does things, that also has a cost. And they wouldn't even come ask us about it in that situation. So I guess I'm saying we shouldn't undervalue what they do, and we set as a priority in the council retreat that this is an issue we should look at and staff should put some time into because it's important. And then I feel like it makes sense to stand back for a minute and restate why this is an important issue to look at right now and why we talked about it so much at the retreat. So it wasn't that long ago we were in a recession, and there were a number of years in a row where I didn't see a job want advertisement on a door at all. There were no jobs. And now there are jobs a lot of places. And when I go to conferences, either I find that the city is either doubled in size or half as big, which is to say there are economic winners and losers. And we are winning in terms of this. There's economic success here. There's lots of opportunities. It's very exciting. And there's also significant challenges that come with that. So it kind of blows me away the number of places I have been recently where they talk about a labor shortage. At Dr. Cog, in addition to talking about not being able to find places for seniors to live and having some of them actually looking for places in other states where they could go, they're saying they can't keep staff. So my husband's coworkers talk about their engineers not being able to afford housing in Lakewood. We've noticed at fast food restaurants that they're getting less and less fast. And I mean, like the last time I went to a Subway, I heard the conversation where they were like, no, that guy needs to be at the cash register because I just hired him 2 hours ago. That it's hard to keep people because there's such a significant labor shortage. We had the South Lakewood Business Association met at White Fence Farm, and White Fence Farm did a presentation, and one of the things that the owner talked about was how hard it is to keep staff, which this is a strong economy. And so what we're seeing is people are moving here like crazy. People are moving here because there are jobs. We need places in terms of the region for people to live, but we also need to recognize that there are challenges in terms of how do we maintain the fabric of existing neighborhoods, how do we deal with traffic, and this, how do we make it work for Lakewood? And so this kind of study, which is paid for through the Economic Development Fund, which seems infinitely logical because it's helping with this economic development situation, gives us the data we need to make more nuanced decisions about something that's critical right now. I mean, when I knock on doors politically for various people, when I do that, more and more I knock on a door and I say, what's important to you? And they say, I'm about to be homeless. That's an issue we need to be looking at.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Thank you. Frankly, I'm in awe with what we're doing here, Nanette. During our retreat, we talked extensively about a housing look at it. And when I looked back on the minutes of that we're going to okay or that we've already voted on, we talked about a housing study, but there was actually never a scope of what it was going to entail. I'm very impressed by your presentation. It encompasses everything. The scope is awesome. But this has morphed into something that I had no idea it was going to grow to this level. About a year and a half ago, I asked, what is the percentage of apartment units to single-family homes along the 13th Avenue corridor, and I couldn't get that answer. And it's like, really? I too have sticker shock on this. And I think it would have been helpful to have come back to council for clarification to see exactly what we were thinking and looking at when we were talking about a housing study. Frankly, this is above and beyond what I anticipated, the direction that we would go. And I'd like to back up what Councillor Franks had to say about being seconded for Council Wickman's amendment. It kind of threw me off guard as well. And I didn't realize that was going to happen. And frankly, I hope that you reintroduce it. I would just like to give a suggestion that when there is an amendment, to ask if anybody has a second. That's helpful. I too didn't realize that was going to happen, and I was close to seconding it myself. It's something I think that's worthy that we go to a study session on this and find out exactly what City Council was looking at, what our expectations were, what price tag we're willing to pay for a housing study. All the input that I have gotten from folks that have looked at the agenda, they're very uncomfortable and do not support this kind of money for this. I'd like to say on a personal level, there's a difference between housing and development. My concern is that down the road, having this, we will justify high density in certain areas and will justify housing in certain places and certain kinds of development without adjacent neighborhood support. I am passionate that any development that we have, any apartments that we have, the high density that we have, must enhance what we've already got and not take away from the property values of the people who already live here and take away from the quality of life that the people have. The reason why we've been asking for a housing study is because and I'm assuming some of you, have gotten so much input regarding the high density that we are going and what it is doing to our quality of life here in Lakewood, and the reason that people came here to Lakewood to begin with. People love our open space. Last night I had somebody tell me there is not going to be a blade of grass left at the direction that we're going. That's why I was interested in a housing study. Apparently, I didn't communicate that well enough. And when you talk about survey fatigue, I think that's a reality, particularly in this particular election year in our political cycle. Folks are getting phone calls constantly. I'm not sure how you take that into effect when you want to have an honest survey, when folks are going to hang up and wonder what the study is and that kind of thing. I also feel that we very much need to have our community input on this and to hear from our neighbors. This is something that we need to take to our ward meetings. I never dreamed we would get to this point tonight. I'm not sure that I'll be supporting it simply because of the amount of money. The scope is awesome. And I think there is value in a lot of the information you're looking at. But I don't hear from anybody that we are actually taking into concern the voices of the people at this point. That's a real concern for me.
Councilor Wickman.
Okay. Now that my process concerns have been dismissed, let me move on to the other half. And that's the whole concept of getting this into the housing study. I think that economic development funds should be spent on creating jobs and getting into studies and housing and stuff like that. I think, although you might argue that technically it meets the semantics, I don't think it meets the spirit of what we intended when we authorize an executive development fund. So I have that concern. Now, this bit about any employer comes in is going to have concerns about housing. Well, sure. They're also going to be concerned about water, climate change, entertainment, transportation costs, insurance costs, utility costs, food costs, taxes. There's a whole lot of stuff that will affect an employer coming. Now, the question is, with that in mind, are we going to have a study on each and everything? Oh, by the way, in schools, each and everything that we can think of that might affect the employers coming in, and we're going to call that economic development? I don't think so. We're stretching this. Now, my issue is, this is not a routine matter to me. I've learned long enough that when there's an agenda, one of the first things we do is study it. So then the study comes back, tells us what we want to hear, and then we use that as a justification for whatever the action steps are going to be. And of course, right off the bat, I know, I'm simplifying, but the study is going to sit there and say that we need more housing, and it's going to conclude that we need housing on the Fed Center, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's going to be action coming out of this. And so my concern is, if we're going down that pathway of we can say that we're not getting into the housing business. That's the semantics. We are looking at interfering with the marketplace in the housing area. And that is significant, and we shouldn't be taking that lightly. And I would want to know, do the citizens really want us going into, whether you want to call it the housing business or interfering with the marketplace or whatever? My sense is they don't. When I look at those citizen surveys, I see that they want us taking care of our core functions, public safety, transportation, parks and recs. These other things are all nice. Everybody likes to have free stuff. But this road to socialism is, I don't think, the direction that we get from our voters. Now, if the voters want to tell me that socialism is the path we want to go and we want to get into housing and interfering with the market, so be it. But as of right now, I don't see that direction. And I see that this is the first step in going down that pathway. And so therefore, I don't think we should be taking that first step without finding out what our citizens want to do in the long term, in the big picture. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that commentary. I just got to back up a road to communism or socialism by doing a housing study. If you talk to Tom Clark from the Metro Denver EDC, this is one of the key things that they're looking at, as making sure that the metro area stays competitive. We're going out and talking to primary employers and asking them for their opinion. And we're having the ability to take a look at a zoning ordinance that has a lot of concern for some people up here to have a better educated understanding of, well, maybe we need to change this in a different way. I'm blown away on how this is being construed into something totally, in some ways, outlandish, is my comment. I mean, this is a housing study that hasn't been done in the city of Lakewood, that communities throughout the metro area are looking at, to make sure that our council is wise on what we have, what we don't have. Councilor or Mayor Pro Tem Johnson said she couldn't even get the numbers that she requested. It's not that easy, and we need to have these numbers and this understanding to make smart decisions for the future. That's what we're up here to do. And this idea that it's going to come back and say we're going to put housing on the Federal Center, you haven't even heard any of it. I mean, have you been listening to the same presentation that I've been listening to? So over an hour debate on a routine nature ordinance of a study where we're going out to find smart people to come back and give us information, and then we as a council can proceed from there. I'm really at a loss.
Well, I just
Councilor Abel, floor is yours.
I'll yield for a couple of minutes if Councilor Wickman has more to say.
Floor is yours.
Thank you. I noticed you took it easily. I think you've handled the questions very well. When things started coming up, like the choices we make of whether we recycle, the more esoteric considerations, I begin to think that those kind of things might crimp the objectivity of the study. And there is only one section of the proposal that I really have issue with, and that has to do with objectivity. Some of the things you want to discuss are the tools, implementation, and strategy. That's what you want to study. How do we steward our resources? What type of citywide policies might be affected? Should the city anticipate modifying policy? I think answering those kind of questions lift us out of an objective study into something that might be a bit more persuasive or pejorative. My concern is that we get the facts, that we know what kind of housing stock we have, what kind of market there may be for those things in the future. But I think these questions of incentives, policies, that should be more left to council to discuss and to form the policies ourselves than to have a study, a survey that tells us how we should look at things.
You're correct.
It
is in your purview to answer those questions.
Then why should we? I'm assuming that you're going to charge us for this section of the study. So my question is...
It's for you to get information so you can develop those strategies. But you may say what strategies are available out there, and our consultant will be available to say, here's a strategy, here's the pros and cons with that strategy, such that you can create a document that you own.
Still have a concern as to how that might affect the objectivity of the rest of the study. So I would be more comfortable if we didn't have those recommendations coming from the consultant. But not sure how to rectify that.
Our expertise would be used to ask you questions and to provide responses. If you don't wish us to make recommendations per se, we don't need to make recommendations to you. We can state the facts, we can make our findings, such as these are abbreviated, by the way. The full scope, I think, is in your packet, but that's another issue. We can make statements of finding and draw those conclusions, but how the city ultimately proceeds is really up to the city. It's really up to you.
Thank you.
Councilor Gutwein, then Councilor Vincent.
Thank you. Nanette, I was wondering if you could explain for anyone watching where the economic development dollars come from.
Yes, it comes from the lodger tax that is assessed on visitors into Lakewood on hotel rooms at 3%.
Thank you. So that's visitors coming into Lakewood.
Or people that use our hotel rooms. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And then I also took the chance to look at the retreat minutes, and I just wanted to share that we have a full page of requests that we made about the housing study. So it's literally a whole page. I don't know if anyone can see that, but we had all kinds of issues talking about growth being inevitable, the city doing a housing study, whether or not we have too much density in certain areas, open space being protected, and obviously I'm not going to read all of these, but I did want to just mention that, you know, back in February, that is the discussion that we had, and it was quite a long list of items, and again, I really appreciate the way that you've been able to address the concerns that we as council brought forward. And then the other thing that I wanted to point out about that discussion is that it really came from counselors, especially if I remember correctly, in closer to the transit-oriented development areas, being concerned about there being too much development there, which would be, you know, the north areas, wards 1 and 2. And that whether or not do we need to dial that back and look at our zoning, did we go too far? And so we are still talking about zoning, which has always been the purview of the city. Cities all across the country have been doing this for over 100 years. And I guess that is all. So I do support moving forward with what we asked you to work on back in February. Thank you.
And I have Councilor Vincent, Harrison, Wickman, and Franks.
Oh, my. Okay, just to make this very quick, I'm going to say, and if Councilor Coop would like to say something different, I think we've been very proactive in talking with our constituents about this housing study. So much so, in fact, that some of them are even getting antsy, once again, about when is it going to start, because they want to know with facts what the heck is going on in their areas. And there's a lot of overlap between 1 and 2, and I don't want to get all in one. But so much so that at one meeting that I was at, that group said, we can't wait. I think all the affordable housing is right around us, and we need to go out and do our own study. So that indicates to me that there's a real need for this, that people want facts. They can't just keep surmising things about what's around. So I, for one, unless there's some disagreement, have been talking to my constituents. I've also heard a lot about the money, and it's been a couple of years since I've been a consultant, I guess, but I've personally thought this was pretty ding-dang cheap for the scope of the project, and I know that's not going to go over well with a lot of people. So that's my piece. I'm done. I'm ready to vote.
Councilor Harrison.
I'd like to call the question.
There's been a motion to call the question.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please cast your votes. Councilor Roybal. Okay, and that passes 9 ayes, 2 nays. Johnson and Franks are the nays. So the question's been called. So, I mean, there were a couple folks that had their lights up still. Do I go right to that and then come back?
We go to the motion.
Okay.
Yeah, the motion to call the question was approved.
Okay. So, cast your votes, please.
On the underlying motion. What are we voting on?
No, we're voting on the motion. The question at hand. Sorry. Was that hold on. I'm going to clear out. Was there a motion originally, though?
Should we do it again, just in case?
Well, we better.
I move for adoption of ordinance O 2016-7. Second. Is 7 right?
39.
2016-39 under item 7.
It's a resolution.
Okay. I move for adoption of Resolution O 2016-37.
Second.
It's, pardon me, it's 2016-39. It's item 7. I just want to make sure it's right.
I move for the adoption of Resolution O 2016-39. Good?
Yeah. Second.
All right, so there's a motion and a second. And because we've called the question, okay, cast your votes, please.
I'd like a clarification from the city attorney. There was no question to be called.
As far as I could tell, there was not a motion previously.
Okay, then I would suggest hearing everybody out.
I withdraw my motion then.
I think that's the right.
Thank you.
So please light up. I know, Ms. Franks, you were lit up. Ms. Harrison.
No, I heard.
Mr. Wickman. Okay. Councilor Wickman.
Just going to say quickly, as far as it being an irrational concern, I have the experience of years ago, council was faced with doing a study of doing an exchange at the Fed Center that would be like the hospital. And then after spending nearly $1 million, it turns out we were going to be spending $28 million. The point is, things evolve rather radically. And so therefore, I have to be a little cautious about what today's study will eventually end up with down the road.
Thank you. Councilor Franks.
Thanks, Mayor Paul. I just wanted to comment. I'm a fairly new counselor, and so when we're saying things are of a routine nature, I take that to be that we're trying to tamp down discussion. And what I want to tell every one of my fellow counselors is I respect every one of you's opinions. I respect that we come from different wards, we have different constituents, we have different backgrounds, we have different thresholds, and so I know Councilor Wickman and I have worked very hard in our Ward 4 meetings to make sure that every voice is heard and that they're cordial and that nobody walks away feeling like they were belittled or their position was less than somebody else's. So that I just wanted to start there because I think that some of the earlier interchange was not in the spirit of what I think we've all agreed to do, was to listen to all the discussion, and we're certainly going to walk away with our own opinions. I also wanted to kind of just ask a couple more questions because I wanted to understand, we're talking about this possibly incentivizing and different types of strategies to get a vibrant city and to maintain a vibrant city, but we've already had this recent zoning overlay, and now people have bought with that in mind, and now we're trying to come back and say that this study may prove out that some areas should have more density, some shouldn't, it may be better served. And what does that do to the current people who now have bought under the new zoning? I guess I'm just trying to make sure that these unintended consequences of trying to understand what do these things mean. And again, the sticker shock and the scope are beyond, I didn't have those discussions with my constituents because I didn't expect this. And had I had some kind of forewarning, I might. But I want to kind of speak to a couple of those things that I just brought up is, that there is zoning in place. And so if we're finding that things, should or shouldn't go somewhere, what does that mean for people who are already next to those zone districts? What happens to them?
I'm trying to think how best to answer that. Is you're going to have data, and that data is going to highlight the pros and cons of things. Those decisions are decisions that City Council will have to make, but you're going to have that informed information so you understand the impacts if you choose X or Y. And if the X is it impacts those that bought in under the current zoning, you'll know that. And you may choose not to choose that as a strategy, or you'll know the impacts of that. And it's all for your discussion, and the resolution will come out of the vision that you choose.
I just wanted to respond to the issue of calling the question because it's something we haven't done very much since the election. And I would say that it's something that happened more frequently on the last council and that happens at DRCOG, and that has to do with holding an efficient meeting. And that's relevant for a couple of reasons. It's relevant because we like it when people can imagine watching our whole meeting, which we appreciate all the people who are still here. Also because we have other agenda items tonight, and so they're still waiting here. And so I think you need a 2/3 vote to call the question, and so the idea is that most of the group feels like it's time to move on, and if you didn't have sort of a vast majority, and if you didn't have that mechanism, things would go a whole lot slower. So I completely agree with the sentiment of everybody's voice matters, and we need to talk about something for long enough for everybody to have an opportunity to speak and be heard. But also I think it's okay and it makes sense to think about efficiency in running a meeting.
With that said, could I have you redo the motion just for clarity for me, myself, and our seconder?
Makes me wonder what is the record for the most times. I move for adoption of Resolution 2016-39.
Second.
All right, a motion and a second. Mr. Abel.
I pressed the button before, I guess. Somehow it didn't register. A couple of editorial comments. One of them is that efficient meetings should take a back seat to everyone getting to speak their mind. That's why we were brought here by the voters, so we could express what we think they wish to hear. And I don't... well, I'll let the other comment go, but I just hate to sacrifice the opinions of our learned council folks for efficiency.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. And it passes 8 ayes, 3 nays, the nays being Wickman, Johnson, and Franks. Does anybody need to take a 2 or 3 minute break before we move into the next? All right, I'm going to recess the meeting at, call us in at 10:05. So 10:10. We'll adjourn till 10:10.
Remember me, I can see that little angel on your knee. Can't you see the kind that sort of looks like me? For I'm the boy whose only joy is loving you, who worries till he hurries home when day is through. And I'm the guy you give your goodnight kisses to. Remember me. Won't you try to recognize me now and then? Why must I identify myself again? For I'm the chap who has the key to your front door, the boy who runs your errand to the grocery store. And I'm the guy you cook the breakfast coffee for. I'm only the husband that you're married to, and I should look a little familiar to you. Remember me.
We reconvene the Lakewood City Council meeting of September 12th, 2016 at 10:11 p.m. Everybody is here, so I don't think we need to go through the roll. However, we are minus our clerk, who will read number 8 into the record when you have a opportunity, please. I could read it.
Resolution 2016-40, approving an assignment of the City of Lakewood's 2016 allocation for private activity bonds to Metro West Housing Solutions.
Well done, thank you. So again, we will call up Deputy City Manager Nanette Nealon, who will start us off, and then we'll go to Metro West Housing Director Tammy Fisher, I think, who's going to come up after.
Good afternoon again, Mayor and City Council. Nanette Nealon, Deputy City Manager. This item tonight is a resolution that is a result of state has a program called Private Activity Bonds, where they allow the municipal government or the county government to allocate a bonding capacity, the allocation to bond up to a certain amount on projects for certain projects. And the two tools that we're at to date is that this allocation we can designate to a project, and that project then is responsible for establishing that finance and using the tax-exempt bonds. Or tonight you can make a decision to relinquish that ability, and that allocation goes back to the state. It is a process that needs to happen by September 15th, and there are absolutely no financial impacts on the city at all. It's just a program that is facilitated by the department, DOLA, and it allows you, and any time a project comes forward, do you want to use your allocation to designate to an entity for a project. So I'm trying to make it very simple because it's a simple tool, and the state requires the city council to pass a resolution. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
And then also, I don't have a question. I was just going to make a comment. One of the aspects of the housing study is that the educational aspects, and that's something that Ms. Fisher will be back during the educational time frame to talk to us more about Metro West Housing and what you do and how you do it.
So I'm going to introduce Tammy with Metro West Housing, the Executive Director, and she'll go over a couple items.
Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. That is not really something I want to follow at 10:15 in the evening, but I'm here. So you're going to have to listen, and I only have about 47 slides. Actually, just 2 pictures. How's that? Pictures. Tammy Fisher. I'm the Director of Metro West Housing Solutions, Lakewood's Housing Authority. As Nanette explained, we are here just to request the use of the private activity bond allocation to ensure that this borrowing mechanism stays in Lakewood and is not relinquished back to the state. We're not seeking approval of a development. We're not seeking any funding. All of our zoning, our uses are in place, but I thought you would probably like to hear a little bit about the project of which we're asking for that allocation. I think you probably are all very familiar with it.
Beautiful.
Yes. 5800, known in the community for as long as I've been here as the Mardashang Building, was built in 1981 and is a concrete 7-story building situated on about 2.84 acres. Only 2 floors of this 187,000 square foot building were ever temporarily occupied. For 35 years, the majority of the building has remained vacant. It has obviously become somewhat of a blighted eyesore along Alameda and certainly underutilized. We will be repurposing the tower into 54 apartment units and some incredible amenity and community space. And then we will develop a new 98-unit community on the current asphalt lot. This development is extremely exciting to us, on multiple levels, obviously. It aligns certainly with Metro West's vision, and it aligns with us as being a partner and part of the city of Lakewood and supporting the city that you want the city to become. First of all, it's transforming a really ugly area into something beautiful. And it's also going to transform the lives of the people who are going to be able to live there. It's also supporting the economic vitality of the city. This is a $34 million project. It's a public-private partnership of which we will be receiving $30 million of private investment for. And that's very exciting when you have that opportunity to bring that into your community. It also supports the economic health of local businesses. You heard the discussion all tonight. This is where people who are making, $17, $18 an hour or less, can live. This is supporting our workforce housing. This is supporting our businesses who are having a hard time finding people that want to work in their businesses because they can't commute and they want to live in their community. 45% or about, and it's like a little under 45% of current Lakewood households already could live in this building based on their income. These households qualify to live at 5,800. I mean, those people are CNAs, are medical assistants, clerical and administrative support staff, the people who clean this building, retail, the restaurant workers, first-year school teachers, our Head Start staff, bank tellers, grocery store clerks. I think you get the picture. Our military personnel and veterans and retired individuals and older folks who want to downsize. We have wait lists at all of our properties. We can't begin to meet the need of these folks that are working hard in Lakewood. And that's just a sample of the people that could live there. As in all family properties also that Metro West develops and owns and manages, we are able to provide a stable home and environment through really strong supportive services and help them create a community which allows students to stay in place at a school and reduce transiency. And that really helps our schools to become successful. We also hope that our track record has made you proud. We love serving Lakewood. I've been here now 21 years doing this, and I have enjoyed every bit of being a part of Lakewood and watching Lakewood change and grow. And as you know, your own Lakewood's Lamar Station Crossing won the National Charles Edson Award for the best tax credit project in the country. And we received that award at the United States Senate building. And Lakewood is on the map, and they know that we know how to do things right. We also have received numerous awards for our administrative innovations, our resident services, our community outreach, our partnerships. We're going to continue doing that kind of good work, and this is just a very exciting place to really make that transformation. This redevelopment is an opportunity not only to transform this eyesore and to make something ugly really beautiful, but it's really going to enhance the community, and I really think support our businesses as well. And so, what you've all been waiting for, the renderings of what we plan on having this look like. There's two renderings from different views. You can see the current tower, and then you can see the asphalt building, the new construction. We're still, tweaking the design and the colors and such, but these are the renderings, and this is what we're going for. We're very, very excited. So with that, that's the project that we're asking for the allocations. If you choose not to, they do go back to the state, and it won't determine whether we do this project or not, but it does show that the allocation will stay in Lakewood. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Thank you for hanging out with us tonight.
It's been fun.
I'm going to now open the public comment period on Resolution 40. Nobody's indicated a desire to speak. I'll now close the public comment period. And I'm going to start with our two council members from Ward 3, Shakti and Councilor Roybal. You can, yes, we'll make a motion so we don't backtrack like we had previously. And then we'll go to our council members from Ward 3.
I move for acceptance of Resolution 2016-40.
Second.
All right. Councilor Roybal.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I've been living in that neighborhood for like 22 years, and I got to talking to Al Martishang. He was a real character, and he had several buildings around the area, including the one on High 70 and Sheridan, which was identical to the Martishang complex that we know now. That being said, that complete area was an eyesore for so long that it just started festering more and more and more. And now that we're starting to get the development in that area, now you can start seeing the movement. We also have School of America that's there. And recently we had a new addition to the neighborhood, which we had a local or a new church come in and move into the area. So that area is starting to develop and grow. And I'd like to thank you for what you're doing there. And I know it takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of encouragement. And lastly, I would just like to say I have a very close friend of mine. His name is George. And George would be here tonight to, just tell us, hey, good job, here we go. But I have him in our prayers. George is having his own challenges, and just wanted to mention that. And so, thank you.
Well said. Thank you, Councilor Roybal. And I do believe his same property on I-70 is vacant as well, or at least was vacant for the majority of its lifetime.
And it was given to a nonprofit, and now I was told it was sold again.
There we go.
So,
Council President Shakti.
So I don't know what they said about you guys in the Senate, but I know in Ward 3, you have a new facility in Belmar, and what is the waiting list on that facility?
Our senior properties have that Cityscape particularly has about 500. It's 130 property.
The 500 person waiting list speaks to a number of things, one of which is the need for housing, but another one is the quality of that building. It's a gorgeous building, both in terms of the building, but more so the way it interacts with the place. So it's there by a natural place, and there's communal area, and you're right there in Belmar. And one of the things that's so I know about that place, and I also know that what you're proposing to do is take something that's blighted and problematic and make it much nicer, and everybody is totally excited and loves it. Like, I don't hear any bad things from any neighbors. So we really appreciate that. And in the pictures, one of the things that struck me the most was the people. That there's more happening there with the New America School and the church, but nobody's doing anything except walking through that parking lot. And so to create a place where people can want to be, particularly on Alameda, where it's so visible to our community, thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you. We're really honored to be able to do it. We really are.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Thank you. I think that this building needs new life, and that's what you're going to give it, and I appreciate that. It's needed. I have a very silly question. Okay. We have a home in our neighborhood that has been vacant for, 4 or 5 years, and it looks like the underground is starting to consume it. I am so surprised that this is actually still usable and hasn't fallen apart inside. What is the infrastructure inside? How does that work when it's vacant for so long?
Well, it will deteriorate. There's no doubt about it. It's the same that this building has deteriorated quite a bit. There's been some folks, living there that probably shouldn't have been living there. There was some activities, some stealing of copper piping and things like that. It's not pretty, but it also hasn't been used. So it'll be gutted, inside. It'll definitely be gutted. We'll have a new skin on the outside as well. But it's concrete, and it is in good shape for that. It's got good bones, and it's really solid. So that's what's exciting for us to fit something inside that outside. And if you look at the way the floors are, they kind of bounce back and forth. There's really not a whole lot of square, so we have to be very creative as we're making our community space and we're making the units, and some of them are just going to be quite outstanding.
This is not a criticism, but please understand process is important. And next time, please come to council sooner rather than wait 3 days before the due date. I think it sends a better message. But I am very supportive. I'm glad to see you do this, and thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Wickman and Councillor Gutwein.
I'm going to second Councillor Ramey's comment. My question is always, who puts these things on the agenda? But I guess more importantly, why are we waiting 3 days before the deadline? All right, it's already been said. The other thing is a little concerning. He's telling me almost half the people in Lakewood will qualify for your housing programs, and then it's like, how do we figure out which half gets subsidized and which half doesn't? The half that's not getting is kind of feeling left out here.
Well, it's income based. So according to the census, a little under 45% of the folks, the households make less than $50,000 a year.
So you're 45%. How do you pick which of that 45% gets the units?
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't serve everybody. That's very difficult. And that's, why we have wait lists of 400 and 500 at all of our properties. It's very difficult. People have to get turned away.
Well, this leads to my concern about the previous thing. Is like, if we're sitting there saying 45% of our people need housing, are we going down this? I just came back from England. This English model of city councils run the housing and stuff like that. Or we are on this pathway down to 45% of the people are going to be in council housing. I'm being philosophical at this point, and enough said for tonight.
Oh, and it's that they're income qualified. They could very well be housed now, is what I'm saying, that these are the people that we live with every day. It's less than 45% of the people in Lakewood are income qualified. It's those people with that income level that qualify to live here. Not that they need housing. All of them may not need housing. It's an income qualification statement.
And then Councillor Franks.
Thank you. I just wanted to say how, I'm excited that we can meet the needs of our community with such an exciting project in that area and make it beautiful. And I went and drove by there recently and just envisioning what could be there. These are the kinds of reasons that I wanted to do this job in the first place and really serve our community. And I also just wanted to say I had the opportunity to speak with one of actually Councilwoman Johnson's friends who lives in
Cityscape. It's very late.
Cityscape. Too much coffee and it's late. Sorry about that. And she just mentioned what an amazing lifestyle she has and the sense of community there and walkability. And we're so fortunate to have such an award-winning group like yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Franks.
Oh, I'll keep this brief. I think the project looks amazing. It's desperately needed. That has been such an eyesore. I would just hope that the units would be reserved for those in the greatest need. I grew up well below the poverty line. I know how difficult it was for us to find housing that we could afford. And so while 45% may qualify, I certainly would hope it'd go to those in the greatest need.
And because of the financing, and this is not something you want to get into tonight, there's, several units, reserved for those at the very lowest income at 30% of the area median income.
Councillor Roybal.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Fisher, I'd like to make a recommendation to you in a positive way. You've never come in front of this council in a long, long time, so we've been estranged a little bit. And I would like to ask you or invite you to come by and do a presentation to us at a study session of what things that you were doing in our neighborhoods and in our city.
I would be honored to do that. I would like to actually personally invite every one of you, if you would like a personal tour instead of me just talking at you, I would be happy to give you a personal tour of what it is that we do provide in the community and come out and see it firsthand. I think that's really powerful. And talk to our residents. But I mean, I'm happy to come to a study session as well, but I do invite you all to come and see what it is that we do.
And absolutely, and I think that's twofold. I know that I was able to take a tour, and there's a lot of properties folks probably have no idea that belong to you. So, Ms. Hodson?
Can I suggest a blended situation where council goes out at one of your sites where you have a room that can accommodate all of council, and then we can be up close and personal to one of your facilities, and you can tell us more about the balance of the projects in the city. How's that sound? And we can get, and it'll be a public meeting, so we'll make it available to the public as well.
No, I'm happy to do that. Happy to. I mean, we love having company. We really do.
Well, thank you very much, and I think we will take a vote. So there's been a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes 11 ayes, 0 nays. Go forth and do good things. Executive report, Ms. Hodson.
Yes, very quickly. 2 things. Just a reminder that next week, September 19th, is our budget study session for 2016 revised and 2017. The meeting starts here in the chambers at 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock on the 19th. The other thing, are there questions on that? Okay, the other thing I wanted to mention, just as a follow-up, we got an email from the Jewish Family Service of Colorado, and remember they provided free lunches to in 3 of our parks, and I want to tell you how that went. At Morris Park, they served 927 meals over the summer. At Mount Air Park, served 1,411 meals. And at Lasley Elementary, they served 1,444 meals. Total, luckily this is written, I don't have to do math right now, total is 3,382 meals for the kids and families in the city of Lakewood. They also gave out about 30 backpacks full of school supplies for children. So that's just so impressive, and we're just so grateful for this partnership. I wanted to inform you of that, so thank you.
Ms. Hodson, thank you for that. Would it be possible to do some sort of proclamation thanking them for that?
Sure, we'll figure.
I'm sure they don't want the credit, but I think.
But we appreciate them so much on behalf of our families, absolutely.
Okay. All right, so mayor and council reports. I will be brief. I had a great walk and talk with Dr. Robert and Gretchen Garcia, who wrote the little book about the Greenbelt and their different things near the Stone House. And Dr. Garcia has a lot of enthusiasm and takes Boy Scouts and kids from Westgate down the different trails and things like that. But it was great to get out, see that amenity. Please join me this Saturday at the Mount Air Farm is where we're going to kick off. We're going to end up at FarmCAD. That'll be a lot of fun. There's actually going to be a lot of events at that walk and talk. Had a really cool opportunity to represent the city of Lakewood at a lunch with the Crown Prince and Princess of Serbia, who were in town. And it was a fascinating experience, and to hear their story and to know that the Serbian immigrants go back to early days of Pueblo and the Ludlow Massacre. Actually, some of those were Serbian immigrants who were here who were killed in the Ludlow Massacre. So coincidentally, the next day in Council Member Johnson and Abel's ward, we had the dedication of St. John the Baptist Serbian Church, which is the only Serbian church in Colorado. So they wanted to thank our building staff for all the hard work and the partnership, because I guess it was a challenge, and our staff was great to work with, and the neighborhood was great to work with. And if you have a chance, stop in there and see and take a look at their church. It was really special to see those folks there celebrating, and they love being in Lakewood. So those are a couple of the things that I had got to do. And then tomorrow we're having a lunch, and some of the council members are going to be in attendance to talk to our service organizations, Kiwanis, Rotary, Optimus, and get an idea of what they're doing and talk to them a little bit about Lakewood Linked and see if we can support their mission and maybe find ways to partner up. Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, this Saturday is the Ward 1 meeting, our September version, 9 o'clock at Holy Shepherd at 9th and Kipling. And the agenda is that we'll be having an update on the student parking situation around Lakewood High School. Principal Lisa Ritchie will be joining us. And then we're also going to be getting input regarding the vision that folks have for the Heritage Cultural Center. Please join us after you walk with the mayor.
There you go. Council President Shakti.
I made a note that it's going to be the harvest full moon, and that there's going to be a guided hike at Bear Creek Lake Park at 6:30 to 9. However, I did not note exactly what day that is. It's on the full moon day.
So when you find the full moon, wander out to Bear Creek Lake Park.
And it's on the calendar, on the city's website calendar.
Councilor Gutwein.
Thank you. I'll defer to Councilwoman Harrison for our ward meeting. Thank you.
Councilor Franks. Councilor Coop.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I do have a couple things. First, I want to congratulate just a wonderful family, wonderful neighbor, and just a very, very good auto mechanic family. The Pickering Automotive family had celebrated their 40th year anniversary in Lakewood on Saturday, and they threw themselves a very nice little party and invited the community to join them there. Just a great group of people that care a lot about their community. They care about their customers, and they're just a gem to have in Lakewood, and I must say in my neighborhood. They were great. Also, I'd like to just ask City Manager Hans, we're going to go back to, remember when we talked about a sidewalk going down Sheridan? I have a request for Councilor Vincent and me. When those plans get detailed enough, the neighborhood is asking how that is going to interact with that 6th Avenue on-ramp and interchange. So when those details get a little more refined, if we could be updated on those so we could pass that on to the neighborhood.
Well, I'll make sure to do that for you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Mm-hmm. That's all I have, Mayor.
Councilor Abel.
I don't believe we'll have another report before the 20th, and we will be having the wards 1 and 2 cops and council at the Clements Center the night of the 20th, the evening of the 20th. So please join us.
Fantastic. Councilor Harrison.
Well, if you decide that you want to just have like coffee and donuts and not walk this weekend, you could come to the Ward 5 meeting at 9 o'clock at the Bear Valley Church. We're having a discussion about senior issues, senior services, and senior possibilities. We'll have both the SRC, Senior Resource Center, and City of Lakewood Clements Center will be there talking about what's available for seniors. Not only, we talked about transportation and touched on senior issues last month, but this is going to be all those other things in addition to like activities and meals and fun things that are out there for seniors. So come if you can and want to have coffee and donuts. The other thing I wanted to ask City Manager Hodgson if she would make sure that there is a thank you for Michael Brogan. Did an impromptu meeting that we had some concerns with Ward 5 about rodent control, and he dropped everything, was able to make a meeting happen, And even though we didn't have a huge turnout, we had really good questions and he gave us really good information. So I've thanked him, but would you make sure his employee record indicates that he did a super job? Thank you.
Councilor Roybal.
Boy, that one's harder to follow. We're going to be having our West Metro Veterans Fair on the 20th of September here, and that happens to be a Tuesday from 1 to 5 at the Elks Club. So I just wanted to invite all the veterans to come down there and get to mingle a little bit, get to see what's going on, what's new, what isn't, and how things are moving. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilor Vincent.
Ward 2 meeting is at 7:30 this Wednesday at 1580 Teller.
Councilor Wickman. No report. All right, anything else for the good of the order? I'd like to thank our agents for hanging out with us tonight and keeping us safe and awake. And we'll adjourn at 10:43 p.m.